start us off with what? With a welcome to the shit show?
Oh, thanks for that, Sean.
Man, I am loving this new mic. It's great.
Wish it came with a new voice.
Don't we all? But there's some things in this life we just can't fix.
Would one of those things be government, Sean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we can fix it actually. So part of this topic is to like discuss like term limits or not term limits. So, Chris, I'm intrigued. I have an idea of how I think you impose this, but are you pro term limits or anti term limits or somewhere in between?
100% anti-term limits, at least for elected officials.
So you think that the president should be able to have more than 2 terms?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Why?
I do. I think the problem is bad politicians, and I think the getting rid of bad politicians doesn't help us get better politicians. But I think if we stand any chance, it's if we can keep good politicians longer, that's our only hope of improving things.
Okay.
So I don't think that.
How long should that be?
It's as long as people will vote for them. Yeah. Well,
you're gonna say that.
I mean, there's things to be said about how people are voting. I think that's more an indictment of our culture than anything. I mean, I think we get the politicians we deserve. We can kind of.
Oh, careful. That's the next thought. Let's go into that next. We can address the voting issue, but let's stick with this. Okay, so no term limits. Any limitations?
I'm fine with some kind of test for competency. Like if you want to say that politicians must be able to pass a test of basically mental clarity, or maybe not pass it to be eligible, but at a certain age they're required to subject themselves to this test and make it public.
That sounds a lot like ageism, sir.
Yes.
And I think that'll get struck down immediately.
I mean, okay, well, we need to fix that then. But
I mean,
no, I mean, like just something where
New York's writing checks for billions of dollars, totaling billions of dollars, and that are in the millions of dollars per person that was discriminated against because they had to take a competency test to be a teacher. So that's why I say that. That's
look,
I don't know that it'll get struck down, but yeah.
I mean, I think if that's where if that's what we're fighting, then the solutions are stuff I can't say on YouTube.
Do they have a certain finality to them?
I don't know what you're talking about, Sean.
Oh, okay. Just thought I'd ask.
The like I think it, and I don't want it to like ban somebody from like removing them from the ballot or anything like that. I'm saying it should just be public knowledge, because anything that can be used to ban somebody from the ballot, as we are seeing right now with what Democrats are doing with a bunch of Republicans trying to get them out of office and off ballots for the insurrection of January 6th. Mm-hmm. Like any power you grant to the government, they will be abused horribly. But I think it's much less likely to be abused if it's just you have to take this test and you have to display the results publicly. And maybe it has to be performed by a doctor who is selected by the opposing party, right?
Okay.
Like just to make it very adversarial. and these rules apply equally to each party, and age is the same. Like, just that way, it's like, okay, the voters can decide whether or not they trust the doctor from the other party. You can get your own doctors as well to refute it, but it just becomes sort of a public trial of competency. I think that would help
Okay.
alleviate a lot of these things. It
I
helped,
don't think that's a horrible idea. Okay.
and without, and it's because I think about, like, well, look at Kentucky. Simultaneously has one of the best senators and one of the worst. And like, it's what I would hope for. If term limits are what get rid of those guys, that doesn't help us any. And it blocks the opportunity of getting rid of the bad senator and keeping the good one.
Okay. I can buy that.
And so I think that principle goes throughout every office.
What about what would your thoughts be on like a hard stop age limit?
I think that kind of goes with the whole, like, as technology evolves, as people get like, if assuming people continue to get healthier and maintain competency longer, I don't, that feels it too akin to term limits. I think that can be accomplished through other methods, like the competency check I talked about. I mean, some of it's, if people want to elect a decrepit, senile old man as the
80 year
president
old
in,
vegetable
yeah, let's, like, hypothetically, in,
says
some,
stuff like Batacaf care and true anomalous sabotage pressure, whatever. Just hypothetically.
says we must re-elect his opponent in a rally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you know, assuming a free and fair election, right?
Confuses Syria with Libya.
Yes, right. But assuming he got elected in a free and fair election, a truly free and fair election, then people get what they vote for. The problem is not the term limits. Its problem is not that we shouldn't allow people that old to run or be elected. It's that the country is sick, that the population is unwell, and the cultural rot is thorough. And you can't fix that with legal changes. There's no structural change. Well, there's some structural change you could do, but it would be drastic and involve things that basically everybody else wouldn't want. They just wouldn't want to be subjected to.
Okay.
Like, you'd have to enact some serious crackdowns on things that you and I would be really annoyed if we were forced to do things against our will on that regard.
Okay.
But because it's a cultural rot, so we get what we deserve to some extent. I think that is our problem, is that
I don't
we're
disagree with you.
we're voting, like, the voting population is short-sighted, stupid, ignorant, but told they're very, very smart by people that want to convince them to vote for them. And even though they never get what they want, they still continue to vote for them.
Feels like that feels oddly specific, sir.
I
Oddly specific.
don't know why you think that.
Just saying. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
Seems
but it's like, I don't think term limits will fix it. But I
I
kind of
agree.
get the sense that you kind of think that term limits might be a good idea.
No, I don't think that term limits are a good idea for a lot of the same reasons that you do. I like I, I have gone back and forth on a lot of this stuff because my initial thought was, okay, well, if like the higher up you go, the less terms you can fulfill, right? Like, so we already have a term limitation on the presidency of 2 terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's 8 years. So let's say you go to the Senate and you put them at 2 terms is 12 years,
Right.
3 terms is 18.
Right.
And then you go down to the House, which, okay, then you start, it's a 2-year term limit, so, or 2-year term. So then what do you stretch that to, right? I don't know what that answer would be, but some sort of stair-stepped model where, like, okay, look, if you decide that you want to, if you were in the House and you want to run for Senate, then you can. If you're in the Senate and you want to run for president, you can, but you can only serve this many terms in the House, this many terms in the Senate, this many as. And so that was a thought that I had. I don't know that it works. I don't know that it does anything necessarily or helps, but it potentially could. The other thing that I thought about was having an age limit,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because not because of necessarily people being incompetent or incapable, but because at some point you need that transfer of power for a
Right.
healthy society to continue to move forward. And so you have right now, you have Dianne Feinstein, who's what, 90 plus,
Yeah. Right.
right? You've got Jerry Nadler, who is on up there.
Well, I mean, this is
Pelosi, who's up there. McConnell, who's up there. Like, all of these people should have retired years ago.
and
And like, I think the reason I was thinking about that is because, like, if we tell the average American that their retirement age is 67, right?
mm-hmm.
Then why would we have our politicians be people that are in their 80s and 90s, right?
Right. No, I mean,
Especially considering that the average, like, lifespan of a human in the United States is sub 80 years old, depending on if you're
right.
talking about male or female. I mean, I think
Sure.
female is 78, 79, and male is
But they're at the
76
very
ish.
least, like, they're past their expected lifespan at some point during their term. No, I understand that the change of power is important, and I think most of this is more representative of what's happened to the Republican and Democratic machines and their collective strongholds. Right?
Sure.
It's not so much that the government's sick; it's that the parties have gotten corrupt in of themselves. And I don't know that it can be. I don't know there's any laws that can fix that. That seems to be more of a
And I don't
cultural
know that it
tolerance
can.
for dirty politicians.
I don't know that it can be fixed.
Sure.
But at the very least, like, my thought with the age, and my thought was not like, okay, it's 67, like, everybody has to get out, but do retirement age plus whatever. So because we know that retirement age has adjusted over the years, not
Mm-hmm.
significantly, but somewhat. And so as you extend that retirement age, as people start to live longer and that kind of stuff, then it adjusts with it.
Well, and what I think I can sort of understand that. Like, if you tie it to a retirement age, then
I mean, you say 67 plus 8 years, right? So at the age of 75, you can no longer be sworn into office as a
if you want to run longer, you have to increase the retirement age.
right.
I don't totally hate that.
And here's my other theory on it that I think might help, right? Is that I think one thing that it will require is it will require the both the RNC and the DNC to start developing new candidates. They're going to have to put work and effort and money into some of these candidates and campaigns to a certain extent.
I mean, or else they'll
And
screw up. But I foresee them more just screwing up.
they may, they
But
very well may, but you won't get the ability to just rest on your laurels and hire or reelect the same incumbent candidate for 30 years.
Right.
right? Like
Right.
that's kind of the thought on it is
You'll have to
one,
pass the
that'll
torch.
you'll have to pass the torch at a certain time, which means that you'll have that passing of power.
And as you do that, you'll have to
And the smart ones,
inherently go through a vetting process, and you'll have to really that'll create
and don't
opportunity for competition.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, like they're gonna f it up, and they're gonna f it up bad. Like I expect that what that will lead to on both sides, right? Both teams are gonna do it, where they pick somebody and haven't done their due diligence and their background and checked all the closets for any and all the skeletons, and it's gonna come back and bite them real bad. If they get smart, what they'll start doing is electing people younger and younger so that they can stay in longer.
And
The
have
problem is those younger people typically don't have as many skeletons in their closet and are not as easy to control because
Yep. I mean, those are all good things.
like the youth is just kind of more wild.
I don't hate it. I don't
I mean,
hate
it's
it. Like,
not
it doesn't seem
perfect.
like a huge loss. I mean, at the moment, like, we're looking at the contemporary situation to apply it now, and I don't really think that's fair because things are so broken.
Why not?
I mean, to
Is there
judge it
any?
by the current status of things, because
Well, that's really the only thing we have to judge it by.
no, I
Because
mean, like in terms of like what it will do to the current, very contemporary power dynamics. Because
well, and
Trump
that's why
is what 70.
Trump would be disqualified under this rule.
Right, right,
Absolutely, and
and it's
I'm okay with that. That's fine. I
oh
think
sure, sure,
and I think currently he seems competent and capable, but I don't like if he's what 77 would be 78 when he took office and would like
he'd be Biden's
finish
age
out
when
at
he takes office.
82. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
get
I
it,
mean he would match the
and
same
it's
age. And I wouldn't guarantee that he would make it all the way through those 4 years. So
oh sure, he seems like he will. That's my estimate right now. But you're right. There's a very real risk that I mean something could happen, or that he's just degrading and hiding it from us. Like there's very real risk there. Absolutely. Um, my point is, I think for a lot of people, it's not palatable because they see Trump as the only really viable solution to what they think the problems are, or at least he's the most viable. And so they don't want to ditch this short-term potential for a long-term gain, basically, because it's
I
hard to predict
mean,
what by
thinking short term.
yeah, of course
What?
people are thinking.
What?
Well, it's harder to
I know.
estimate the cost. I mean, because there's very real long-term benefits of what Trump might potentially do as far as dismantling some of these bureaucratic institutions, which kind of brings me to what I was thinking when term limits is I don't want term limits for elected politicians, but the bureaucrats. I think the head bureaucrats for a lot of these agencies, the stuff appointed by Congress, could really benefit from some term limits.
See, and I'm of the belief more along the lines that those roles shouldn't exist, and so becomes a non-issue.
That these like head of the DOJ, like you don't think there should be an attorney general. You don't think that there should
Well, the attorney
be.
general is appointed by the president, and they change on a pretty regular basis.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's fair. But like, there's a
Right.
lot of the like. I
I'm just
guess
saying, like hypothetically, like
right.
the head of the NIH and NAID, NAID or
Right.
whatever, like whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
Like,
There's way too many government agencies, and we need to reduce it probably by an order of magnitude. But I don't think it's reasonable to suggest that there will be none, or that it's feasible to keep a government system where there are none.
no,
I'm just
but
thinking that, and I think
the less there are, the less they can do. I
well, I
think.
mean, I like, I think that there is, I think there's an aspect of if that these institutions become the sort of the tools by which these chief bureaucrats attempt to wield and gain power for the sake of power.
Sure.
And the more that that is not an option, I think the more that they will seek through more private market stuff, which I think is far better way to attain power.
I mean, to a certain extent, yes. But I mean, so what do? You tell people that they can't work as a government employee for longer than X number of years?
No, I would say that you can't hold like certain level positions in the government for longer than X number of years. And
So
I don't know
does that mean you
exactly.
can move up, or
Um,
because at that point you're
my
just
my
creating a funnel?
well, and some of it is like I'm trying to. I think the more upward churn you get, a little bit, the better in some ways,
To a certain extent, absolutely.
because it becomes more about the direction of the institution, not the direction of the individual. Um, but I definitely see some risks there. And I don't know exactly, like the bureaucratic structure is so convoluted and varies from institution to institution. So I'm not sure exactly how to break it down specifically, whether it's going to be like, okay, once you get into this realm, this level, you have 6 years to make your mark, or 6 years to sort of get done what you want to get done.
Sure.
Now, you want to leave a legacy? Great. You need to pick. You need to bring someone up below you who's going to be influenced by this. You need to bring in that institutional knowledge, and maybe that's more of the problem, right? I'm making a little bit of guess about what the problem is. I will admit that I'm not entirely certain on the intricacies of how it works, but I do keep seeing these guys like
And I
Fauci who have just been
and
in way too long and have been causing problems the whole time. And I do
right.
not see any good bureaucrat. They're like, thank God we've had them for 20 years.
Sure. But I mean, you could say that that same kind of funneling technique is what got us to where we're at now with regards to the generals that we have in power in the military, because they follow kind of that type of system.
Yep.
And so that's a very real example of a failure of that type of system. Now, to be clear, like, I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong. I think that there does have some merit. I think it just needs to probably be looked at deeper and be fleshed out more, because I think
What?
it's got some real possibility, especially if you did, like, I think you should do the same thing with regards to an age limit. And because I mean, all, if I understand it correctly, they all have government pensions anyway.
Yeah.
Most of those, okay, well, all right, fine.
Well, and some of it is, and this is actually one of the reasons why I went against term limits for like presidents or something. It's like you need top down accountability in order for this to work. There's the only way these structures work at all is if like, so the president needs to come in and needs to be able to just start. The generals need to be held accountable to the president, and in turn, they'll need to hold their staff and the people directly under them accountable. And that sort of, you want to establish a culture of competency. That needs to be a top down thing.
Right. And here's the problem that I have with doing a no term limits on presidents is, historically that's gone very badly.
When and where?
Well, Rome specifically was a great example.
Was that no term limits or just no elections?
Well, it was no term limits that led to no elections, that led to a dissolution of the republic and turning
Yeah, I
over
mean,
to the Roman Empire, right? Like, that's
I guess the idea is that if somebody ever gets too influential, then there's no way to get rid of them.
right.
Like they can, if they're too popular, they can suspend elections, I guess, and no one's going to care. That I kind of understand. Um,
And don't get me wrong, I get what you're saying.
I don't know if I believe that is a real risk.
I mean, on the other side of that, if you look at, say, Russia today, Putin has been the president of Russia for go on, what, 20 years now?
I mean, he's basically been in charge since
And
the fall of the Soviet Union.
no, not since the fall, but
Well,
I mean,
because
it was
even when you had what's his name?
Gorbachev there for a while.
Okay,
Mikhail Gorbachev, yeah.
I thought
Um,
it was after him. I don't know.
and then, but yeah, I mean, like, yeah, he did have a separation there where he, like, somebody else, I don't even remember who it
Yeah,
was, but I think it's
Medvedev.
Zaluzhny. Maybe Mend. That may be right.
Medvedev. Yeah, and if I recall correctly, like I was reading something that was like, no, but Putin was still like the prime minister or something, and he was still very much in control.
And Medvedev is
Like,
still high up in the
right.
Russian, but fine.
The
So
fact that
six of one,
right.
half dozen of the other. What does it really matter? They're both
Sure.
there. But I mean,
Right.
if you look at Putin, has been running Russia for the last 20 years,
Yep.
let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and they've done pretty well. Like as a
you-
society, as a country, they've done fairly well. And there's both sides, right? Like that can happen on both sides. Now, the people who disagree with you or that very much dislike Putin will tell you that he's an authoritarian dictator, which is possible, but doesn't appear that it's all that accurate.
I mean,
Because what I'm seeing is that, look, they have laws on the books that are now granted strict by our standards, but they're also very strict in their adherence to enforcement of those laws.
sure.
And
And
that's where people, I think, get the
well, and
authoritarian.
it's also there's conduct that we don't generally approve of in our culture, such as accounts of journalists being thrown out of windows.
I
There
haven't
were
heard
a
that, but
couple journalists that they think were thrown out, not like super recently, but there was some journalists that were critical of Putin that were thrown out of a window by somebody.
interesting.
It's not recent. This is 15 years ago, I think.
Oh, okay.
And it's and some of it is that
I
there
mean,
are well,
and the
but
reason that I say that is because I've seen journalists recently who were openly like against
sure,
Putin, and like there was one that was a guy that was a British citizen or something like that, and
but
they just
anyway,
like they took him in, they questioned him, and they were like, "I'm sorry, you have to leave. You can't be here anymore." And
well, and it's
like took him to the border, and
sure they're not as tolerant of Russia's not intolerant of public criticism as the U.S. thinks they should be.
sure,
Um, and like you can disagree with it. That's fine. I do think throwing somebody out the window not appropriate. But one like I'm looking at the
it's a
fall of the Soviet. Hold on, I'm looking
bit
at the
of an
fall of
overreaction, but yes,
right. I'm looking at the fall of the Soviet Union, what that would have been like, and everything I was talking about, like what happened the next like as these institutions dissolved. Well, the people with the guns just seized the factory, right? Like the people that run the factory, they didn't own the factory. They didn't have any stake in that. They're just the
nobody
ones
owned
that
it. The
ran
state
it.
owned it.
Right. So you had the guy that ran the factory, but he's like, what do I do? Who do I make stuff for? Well, you had the only enterprises in town that was the mob came in and just said, you work for us now. And like, why should I? Well, we've got the guns and we'll pay you. And they were the ones that became the oligarchs and the owners. Those were the people that started the companies and started doing that. Well, you can imagine they're not exactly super inclined to obey the rule of law, right? Which would
Sure,
be important for gaining a stable country. So
right.
the fact that they were able to maintain stability was basically probably only done because Putin said, "You will conduct yourselves as is appropriately, or I will throw you out a window. I will, like, you will be, we will have you arrested and shot." And I think some of that is Putin may or may not have had that journalist thrown out the window, but I guarantee you the other oligarchs would.
Well,
and
and
it's
honestly, if you
equally
look at
likely
it,
that they would have done it.
if you look at the numbers, Putin evidently ran all of the old oligarchs that took over after the Soviet Union out of the country because they were just siphoning. They weren't
Yep.
giving anything back to the country. Now,
Yep.
did he help build new oligarchs? That's a question of debate, and I would argue that he probably did. He likely
Oh yes.
put the people in those positions with the understanding that one, you will be you will give back to the community, you will give back to the state, you will give back to the country, and you know, more of like a benevolent oligarch type situation. And so yeah, like I said, I think there's the argument either side of that conversation. I'll even offer up the anti to my argument of age, and that is, Lord, please forgive me, Fetterman out of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
There's no age issue there.
Yeah. And that's why I'm like, a competency test would be great.
But I don't think a competency test would have done anything in that election either.
One, I think, and then
I think it was very clear to everybody that he has cognitive decline. Now, in all fairness, I don't know that that's his fault. A lot of that could be due to the stroke that he had, or
I don't think
several
it
strokes
is
that it
his
sounds like
fault.
that he had.
It's not his
But
fault. I mean, it's his fault in the sense that it's a fault that he has and that he had like, but
no, it's
I
not.
don't think
It's
that you
not
can
a.
blame
It's not
him.
a fault. It's not his fault. It is his. I mean, you can't blame him for it.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, right? Like it's still a reality. The reality is that he can't one understand spoken word. He has to be able to read it, and even at that point, he still has a hard time. And whenever he's giving speeches or anything like that, he has real issues communicating. And the people of Pennsylvania elected him anyway.
Sure.
That's a problem. And I don't know how you solve that. That is, to your point, that is a cultural issue that somehow you've got to get under control. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know if there is a solution to that, because that's, to me, that's blatant. Like
I mean, I think that there
clear.
is a. I mean, I don't think the system needs a lot of changes in general. I think the changes are almost entirely cultural. I think that there is a problem in our society that is we lack direction, we lack purpose, we lack values. And so we are very easily taken along, and like we just keep finding enemies. We keep finding things that give us a sense of urgency. So like the Democrats look at Republicans not like they disagree, but like they're evil. And
Sure.
Similarly, you see, I mean, you'll go on the internet and go to basically any forum, and you'll start to see somebody is going to be like, criticizing either the, the Jews, the elites, the insert group here as being the problem. And it's like, no, there's no like group that is the problem in that sense, sort of the groups that are by their definition relegated to the people that are the problem, right? Like the politicians in power. Well, they're obviously the problem because by the nature of being in power.
So I agree with you and disagree with you. So I agree with you on most of those groups that you named off. It's just it's a ghost. That's all it is. It's
Right.
it's something to point at and say, this is bad. This bad, this evil, this is the reason for my problems. Now I also think that there are individuals, and a group of individuals specifically, with like the WEF and
Yes.
the Bilderberg group and
Right.
all of those fun things that do actually try to do those things, but those are
Sure.
different than what most people are talking about. So I
There
just
are
wanted
there
to
are
make sure that
absolutely no. It's a,
I
it's a
clarify
very
on that.
important distinction, right? There are
Very, very
people
important.
globbing together to do things that are, and I'm in our opinion, bad.
And
I think part of the reasons they are doing this is because they themselves are desperate for direction, and that they have picked up bastardized ones as a
they who?
like the WEF, right?
Okay. I didn't
I
know if you're
think
talking about the WEF or the people who are spouting on forums. So I'm just trying to make
yeah,
sure that I
no,
clarify.
I mean they're both doing the same thing. One group has power, the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just when you mix power in with this desperate need for, like, when you mix power and drive, you get, and without a direction, you get a crash. Like,
I mean, I so I I I think it's more nefarious than what you think it is.
well, and some of this, those are not mutually exclusive, and some of this
I
is I'm speaking a little bit spiritually here, because I don't think there's a huge difference between somebody doing something morally wrong and nefarious and them straying because they don't have direction. I think it tends to be what happens is you stray in off the moral path if you don't have direction.
I agree, but I don't think that I okay, I'm not going to go down that same path. I believe that it is truly nefarious. I think that there are people out there who actually believe and do things just to see if they can, like, it's when you've got like let's say the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or any of those kind of families who have billions of dollars that they have,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you let's say if you had $1 billion,
Mm-hmm.
what purpose is there in life for like making money or doing anything like that? Now, if you're a good person, most likely what you do is you take that money and you use it to do good things in the world and try to do those kinds of stuff, right?
I
Like
mean,
you try to
yeah.
be a force for good. If you're an evil person, you may take that money just to see what you can make the plebs do.
I mean, you're probably right that there's some people that
I'm not saying all of
statistically
them.
there's probably that's a fairly likely human goal. Like, I'm bored, I'm gonna go do some crazy shit, right?
Hmm.
I think that's a lot of why you see the people in Epstein Island. Honestly, they're bored and they want to see what they can do. They
Maybe.
want to just, like,
I
they don't
wouldn't.
have any.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised with Epstein Island. Like, I'm not defending these people, but like, what are the odds that you show up there and say you're a dude and th- they bring in a girl, they bring in a bunch of girls and everybody's like hanging out by the pool and swimming and partying and having a good time, and they all look to be of age.
Oh, sure.
They look like they're 18, 19, 20-year-old girls. Is that is that maybe a little bit immoral? Potentially. Is it illegal? Absolutely not. And it's where some people might disagree with it. It's not illegal, but what you don't know is that all of those girls are underage. So then they use it as blackmail for you.
Oh, I mean,
I think there's a lot of that that goes on too. Now, don't get me wrong. I think
yeah.
there are a lot of explicitly bad people who are like, oh, I know what they do at Epstein Island and I want to go. Like,
Oh,
I
sure.
think that happens a lot,
Well, it's.
but
I mean, you get two types of people that result from that. You get the type of people that you know, oh yeah, this girl was brought in, and you have some fun with her, let's say, and then afterwards you find out, oh yeah, she's not 19, she's 16. And by the way, we have proof, so you better
right.
do what we tell you. Well, that person's gonna be like, fine, and then just never talk to the Epstein clan again. They're going to distance themselves as far as they can. They're going to try to extricate themselves from that scenario as
I
best
don't
they
think it
can.
matters. I bet they
I
don't.
I mean, my guess is they're going to be on the hook for them for the rest of their life, but they're not going to get more involved, right? They may be in the pocket, but they're not going to go to any Epstein parties anymore. They're not going to accept any gifts. They're not going to. They're gonna be under the thumb for the rest of their life, but they're not going to engage in anything worse.
Maybe, but
Some people
I
are.
I
I don't
don't.
know what to.
Yeah, I
That's one
think you.
path.
Yeah,
The other path is they just say, screw it, and they just, what else you got? Like, you just keep accepting these sort of gifts and like just
it's
keep
the
going to
whole.
parties, keep engaging in it. You're
Yeah,
just
it's
in.
the in for a penny, in for a pound type mentality on some of them, right? Like it's too
Right.
late now for me now. I might as well take advantage of it. And I would argue that a lot of people are weak enough that they would do that. One and two, if you spend a lot of time around people like Epstein, unfortunately, like he's well connected and has a lot of very wealthy people around him, which means that puts you in place to either make more money, gain more power, and all of these people I say all, most of them as a general rule, that tends to be the thing that drives them. So yeah, that's
Right.
absolutely a thing.
Oh, sure. It's. I mean, you've got like you're going to be you're going to bump into them in Epstein party, and he's going to know that the hooks are in on them, and so
Right,
you can kind of trust them a little bit more because they can't turn
right,
against this group.
right.
Um, yeah, there's an aspect of that, but I think that there is also when you get the people that are just like um, wealthy and powerful and just don't really have any moral compass, and they do this, they go, okay, you got me, but like I don't have I don't feel guilty about this,
Sure.
and they just keep going for it, and they enjoy
I
the sort of power.
right, I agree.
And
But
it's
that's
and so I do think that there's definitely, to your point, those billionaires that will try to toy with the population. I think, however, innate within the human desire is a human desire for a cause, a purpose, something. And I think a lot of these like WEF guys think they're helping, think they're doing for a noble cause. Now they're not looking too close, and they're not like actually trying for it, because that would be hard and require convictions of morality that they don't really have. But subconsciously, also kind of do this to feel like they're engaging in a cause. Their goal is not actually to have a cause; is to feel like they're engaging in a cause.
I mean, maybe I just don't see that. I don't agree with it. Like it's hard for me to buy that whenever all of them are talking about climate change and how horrible it is for the world and that it's the end of everything, and then they fly to Davos on their private jets.
I mean, yes, but it's if they don't actually care about solving the problem, they care about feeling like they're part of the group solving the problem, that they're a special group doing
I
the good
don't
work.
I don't even know that it's about feeling. I think it's more about having the appearance of, because I look good because I go on TV and I tell people that we need to solve climate change. We need to
Yeah,
we need to work on it so that I can have the appearance that I did that. What people don't realize is that, oh yeah, by the way, at the same time I'm flying to Davos next week to go to the WEF's forum. But you look at, I mean, who is it? Leonardo DiCaprio,
okay,
right? He made a big statement at one of the awards shows a few years ago about how climate change is real and we have to do something about it now.
right,
And then immediately got on his private jet and flew out to one of like his 7 yachts.
sure,
Like,
sure. And
you
there's all sorts of
don't
ways to
piss down my
justify it.
back and tell me that it's raining. Like, I'm
I mean,
sorry.
it's all sorts of ways to justify that in your mind, but I just keep coming back to every time I hear someone talk about wealthy people and how they're just not that interesting. They're not that special. They're just like normal people with money. And I think about normal people that I see, and they will latch on to any club they can, right? They want to be part of a cause and a group, and they want to feel like they have that purpose, like they're doing something important, that they are important in some manner. And I think this kind of gives that to them.
I think I think you're I, I I could be wrong. I think you're conflating the fact that they want to be part of the group with the fact that they want to feel like they're doing something good. I think they just want to be part of the group personally. And I think that those people who just want to be part of the group or who go along to just get along, I think they tend to be just quiet. And so like they join the group because that's part of being the in group, but they're not outspoken about it and trying to be and acting like activists.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
I see the same stuff I saw in like some of the clubs in like college and stuff where it was like it didn't they were like activism was a way to gain status within the group, and that in order for the group to feel like the status was valuable because the group felt kind of important because it was doing something that they thought was important and valued, and it gave them a self of self-importance, because I think it's both feeling a part of the group and the self-importance is what they gain out of it. And I think you and I are looking at, or I think you are looking at how you and I would look at it as like, well, if it's important, then we must solve it. We must work towards solving it. And they're just seeking a feeling of self-importance.
And I think there's something to be said for that, because there are people who will rally for certain causes just to feel like they're doing something.
Well,
Right.
I think
Even if what they're doing is actually ends up being counterproductive to
yep.
the reality of what their goals are. And that's fair. I think whenever you get to a certain level, especially in stuff like the WEF or Davos or any of those big groups, I think that becomes a problem. I don't think that's the case anymore. And I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. That's the other thing.
I mean, I don't know if I'm giving them benefit of anything, because that to me that seems very weak. Like,
I agree, but
and it's so I mean, I don't know. I just think about the type of people that are activists, right? The
okay,
people that like, Tim Pool will talk about his experience working for some of these organizations trying to collect money on the streets when he was younger,
right.
and how talks about how people evolved through the organization and all that. And it seems very similar to what happens if you gave those people power, money, and authority, and they would seek more power, money, and authority while furthering the goal of the group, even though they don't need to. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong on this. I don't know. It's what I see is that I think.
I don't think either one of us will ever know.
Oh yeah, I don't really
But
want to meet these people either. But
I mean, yeah. But I just, like I said, I think that's where what I see going on in the different things in the world, and perhaps I'm wrong. Like I just
sure.
I don't give them a benefit of the doubt of being like, oh well, you're actually trying to do something good, or you're trying to do something that you feel like will make you feel good, and all that. Like I don't I
I
I think
mean,
I think that they're hang
one
on,
of
let me
one of those
finish.
things is noble. One of those things isn't. But go on.
I disagree, but I I think that their actual like their purpose is nefarious. I think that a lot of them, not all of them, but I think a lot of them, their actual true purpose is nefarious. I mean, do you think that like the kid that plays with the anthill worries about how the ants feel?
No.
So if you're one of the elite that to where money is beyond comprehension for most people, do you think you worry about what the other people think, or do you think, maybe I'm just going to play with them a little bit and let's see what kind of things I can do?
I mean, I don't.
It's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I mean, it's well. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer is yes on that one. I don't like. I understand the comparison. I just don't know if it. I agree that it applies. And like you said
Maybe it doesn't.
previously, that like it's like they're still people. They're not. I guess the equivalent would be some massively superior being, right? Comparing humans to ants. Um,
What makes you
and
think that they're? I mean, I get that they're humans, but what makes you think that they're not massively superior to you or I?
they're human. Like I don't. What do we say superior? What do you mean?
I
So I
mean,
don't
they have
think
the
they don't
ability
have.
to. I understand what you mean.
Okay.
I'm saying, like, if you look at it from a global standpoint,
Hmm.
right? What they can do anything they want to and get away with it. You and I cannot do that.
Yes.
How does that not make them vastly superior to us? They're playing the game of life, this game that we call life. They're playing it by an entirely different set of rules. Those
Yeah,
rules
but
don't
there's
apply to them.
still. I mean, it's like I don't quite know how to answer the question because it's like I don't know. There's no one mechanism that prevents them from being superior, but they're still they don't have these. One, they grew up being human. Most of them had normal-ish lives.
Okay.
Um, so they ostensibly had childhood friends. They had human relationships, and they're still human.
Yeah,
Most of their psyches aren't going to be like most of them. I don't think are true psychopaths.
I disagree strongly.
Oh, I think they're probably over selected for psychopathy. True, that'll give you. But I don't think it's given how rare psychopaths are. I don't think it's they're all psychopaths.
No, I don't think all of them, but
But
I
I
would
mean,
say
maybe
probably the plurality, maybe even the majority.
possibly, yeah. And it's I don't, but I still think that they have this basic human needs of purpose. Plus, it just seems like just torturing ants would get boring.
Okay.
Like it's um like some of them are going to. I think a lot of them want to shape the world in their own image. I think that's what they mostly want. I think a
Okay.
lot of them have become narcissists as a result of the power, and I think that they want to shape the world in their own image, and I think that they want to do stuff that makes them feel good about themselves.
See, and I, I think that they were narcissistic sociopaths to begin with, which is what got them to where they're at. And now, again, not all, but a vast majority, I would argue probably. Like, I don't know that. Like, I think Elon Musk is probably a narcissist. I don't know that he's a psychopath or a sociopath.
Yeah,
Bill
Elon Musk is a little
Bill
hard
Gates
because he's
Bill Gates,
yeah.
I could easily make the argument that he is a narcissist and a psychopath or a sociopath,
Yeah, well, you can see that in his
right?
starting point. Like you look at how he was starting Microsoft, and like, oh, you're just a bad dude.
Starting Microsoft. He bought Microsoft. He's a sales guy. People think that
Did he
he's
buy Microsoft? I know he like bought the underlying stuff. Okay.
like he bought the code. He may have started Microsoft company, but
Yes. Okay.
he bought the
Yes.
operating
Yes.
system from somebody else. He's just a sales guy. People
Hmm.
think that he's like this great like no,
No,
he is a sales guy.
he
That's
understood
all.
computers back when computers were simple, and he's a good sales guy at that.
Right.
Like he was cunning. I'll give him that. Like he did things that were quite cutthroat. Um.
Like if someone were to have narcissistic and
Oh, I think he's a bad dude. I don't know what you want me to just, like. I think
this
that guy. If you said that I think Bill Gates. I think he toys with people, but I think he toys with people more on the small scale. Like toys for the sake of toys. He toys with people on the large scale, but not for the sake of just playing with his food.
bro.
I don't think he's playing with his food at a large scale. I think he's playing with the world. Like, I think he wants the world to be. I think he wants to shape the world in a desired plan, but the desired plan is going to kill billions. And I think he's okay with that.
And so how does that not prove my point that these people
I'm not
that these
like
people
you.
are fucking horrible and they have absolutely
I'm not saying they're
horrendous
good people.
thoughts for, like, he's not doing it for an altruistic purpose, unless his altruistic purpose is he's trying to save the earth by eliminating the human race, which you could argue that.
Yeah, kinda. I mean, it's if you twist the morality into weird shapes, it starts to become altruism, because they don't have really strong coherent morals. It's a lot
Right.
more of like worshiping the Earth goddess type shit.
I understand.
Um,
And let me be, I think you can make the argument that that's what he's trying to do to a certain extent, but his actions tell me differently. One, and two, I don't think he's the worst of them. I think a lot of people that are out there that do these kinds of things do them just to see if they can make the puppets dance.
Maybe I it's possible.
If you were worth $500 million,
I mean, my problem is if I was worth $500 million,
no,
I
just
would
hypothetically,
have
if you're worth $500 million, what game can you play?
what game?
Yeah, like in the
Is it
game of
gain or
life,
game?
game,
Um,
GAME. What game can you play? Like, you play chess, you play checkers. What do you like? What game do you play that actually gives you any kind of excitement?
I play
Because
building games in my free time, so maybe that's
right,
part of it. Like, I would build stuff. I would
right,
start massive
you would,
projects.
because I think that
Right.
you're probably a decent person. I don't think if you have somebody who has the narcissistic tendencies and is either a psychopath or a sociopath, most likely a sociopath, right? Because that's the kind of, you have to think about what the kind of drive and determination does it take for people to get to that level. Typically, that's what it takes, is those kind of tendencies. So
Yeah.
if that's the case and they have those tendencies, what other game? It's like going to a casino where people like, oh, I keep winning and I'm betting $1,000, so now I'm betting $10,000 a hand, trying to chase the gambler's high. Well, it's kind of the same thing in that, okay, how do I get to where I get, can get the rush of messing with stuff? Well, what if I just see if I can destroy a nation? That's George Soros.
Well, and I do
He did
think that
that.
there's a lot of there's some like vindictive stuff they do. I'll give you that. There's definitely like, this nation offended me because they're not willing to abide by my plan. I shall crush them. Do that? Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I'm bigger and stronger than this nation. They should know better, and they crush them. Yeah, no, they do that. They do that, and there's probably an aspect that they did it for fun to show that they could.
That's
I'll
my
give you
point.
that. Yep.
That's all I'm
Yep.
saying. I think there are
I
a
don't
lot of
think that
people who
is.
try to do that. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know that
Okay.
all of them can do that. Obviously, Soros can,
They will crush
but
businesses and they will crush companies to show that they can. This is
yeah,
yes, I do believe that. I do think, however, this is like, they're trying to play the building game. The problem is they are not humble enough to recognize that the rules of the game are not what they thought they were.
I, I'm,
But
I'm, I don't really know that I care what their mentality is on that one way or the other. I just
well, and
am
it's
more interested in what their plans are and what their end goal is. That's it.
and that is, when talking at that level, that's probably fair. I look at this more as like, I see the same trends in them that I see in the average person. And I think that if the problem is the same regardless of level of power and whatever, then I kind of think that means that a lot of good can be done by trying to tweak the culture to fix that.
Maybe.
Like, I don't like, because I see a universal lack of purpose in people, like a true purpose. And so it's one of those things where, like, there's a lot of people out there that say, well, this is the way it's always been. Like, okay, well, then it's always been pretty unpleasant. So let's see if we can fix that. Because I think that giving, I don't know if it requires a higher power, but just a recognition of strong morality, and one that can be justified, and not just morality, but like purpose. I don't know if you'd call that necessarily part of morality, but
I don't know where are you going with this? I'm confused.
when we were talking about the degradation of culture, so I'm sort of thinking about like what we were talking about, like, well, you were saying there's not something that could be done to fix culture. And I think there are some things that maybe could be. What are you saying? You don't know of anything. You don't know how you fix culture, I think is what you said. You do know how to fix culture?
Not what I said.
What did you say?
I said I don't know how to, not culture. I don't know how to fix the government. I don't know what the fix is for the government.
Oh, sure.
And
But
I don't know what
we were
I don't
talking
know
about
how to fix people.
the,
Now, potentially you thought I meant culture with regards to like people voting for people like Fetterman.
yeah.
I didn't say culture, but it doesn't matter. I don't know how you fix that. Like, that's ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, I think
That's a lack of care.
it is a lack of care.
Now, that could lead into the other discussion of maybe we need to fix voting.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of where this is going, right? Do we need, like, how do you fix voting? Because it does seem to be fairly strongly cultural. Like, there's aspects of, I don't think laws can fix culture.
No.
I think laws can enforce existing culture and strengthen like existing sort of subculture or elements of culture.
Right, but all you're doing at that point is just putting into law what's already been agreed upon amongst the people.
Right. You're basically giving a sense of,
You're codifying it. You're
right.
codifying
You're giving some
basic
strength.
behavior.
You're giving some strength to a specific cultural set of values that are fairly dominant, at least
Sure.
regionally. And it's so like I look at the issue with voting, and I think the biggest problem is people that don't know and don't care that are voting.
Right.
And currently, the way it's set up, if you don't vote, that sort of means that you're accepting what everybody else comes up with. It's like, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you don't know and you want to not vote and you want to just be like, look, other people are going to decide for me, and I'll just live with it. Fine.
I would
It's not
argue
my
that
nature, but
if you're uninformed, you shouldn't be allowed to vote.
right. And as you've said multiple times, in the age of technology, ignorance is a choice. And it's not to say that you have to choose to be ignorant about some things. And you may be like, I don't want to decide, like, I don't understand politics. I don't understand the nuances of it. I see that it's complicated. Neither side seems clearly right or wrong. So I'm just going to navigate the world in front of me and let other people deal with it. Fine, right. I kind of get that.
And clearly, like, you can be wrong, right? Like, you can get bad information and you could make a poor decision because you got bad information.
Right.
But bad information, I think, is still, if you're making the effort, is better than no information.
It's a key component of the wisdom of the crowds is that everybody is trying.
And then the crowds.
The wisdom of the crowds. Ever heard this? Right. It's the idea that it's as a group.
Like it's something along the lines of like the combined knowledge of the internet.
Kind of. Right? It's like something that was more.
If you get a group of enough people together who have some level of intelligence, it's more likely that you're going to find somebody there or several somebodies who have some semblance of experience in this realm and will be knowledgeable about the facts of whatever it is you're talking about.
Yeah,
Kind of
I mean,
something along those lines.
it's a little more complicated than that. So it's more.
Okay.
This has been something that,
I
I mean,
don't.
this is something we saw pre-internet. It was something that's been taught in business schools, and I think my dad referenced something that was in he learned at McKinsey and Company in one of their training. Don't quote me on that; I could be wrong. But it was something like they would like watch a movie and they'd watch the first part of it and they'd try to guess the outcome, and you'd make the individual guess, and then as a group you'd discuss and you'd make a group guess. And the majority of the time, the group guess would be more accurate than any single individual guess. And it didn't
Okay.
matter what methodology you used, it just sort of that as you incorporate more people and larger groups of people, and as that information gets combined and these people interact with the goal of finding that information, you distill sort of more accurate stuff. And that's kind of the wisdom
Okay.
of the crowd. So the crowd as a whole
Wouldn't
has
that
a lot more knowledge.
wouldn't that assume that you have to have a certain level of information to begin with? Knowledge, experience, and probably intelligence.
Not necessarily, because it's kind of a relative thing. And this is something we like. This is a simplistic model and more of a
Sure.
trend that can be applied because it can break through all sorts of scenarios.
Right.
Um, but it's basically it's a way of sort of phrasing the idea that the sum total of the knowledge available to a group of people is always going to be greater than the knowledge available to any single person.
Sure.
And so as a result, these sort of crowdsourced thinking, if done properly, has a strong tendency to yield better outcomes.
Okay. And
That's the wisdom of
agreed,
the
but
crowd.
if in today's world,
Well,
the
in today's
the
world,
wisdom of the crowd is sitting in the internet. Like it's all out there
yes,
somewhere.
right. Well,
Somewhere.
in and this is very much the wisdom of the crowd makes a lot of assumptions. That trend only holds when the group that you're referring to is engaging in the goal of determining truth
Sure.
or predicting truth, shall we say.
Right.
So if you have competing interests, if you have people whose goal is not to seek truth, not to get the right answer, but say
Right.
control, then it breaks down. Um, so there's that is kind of what voting, I think, is really trying to accomplish in many ways. It's one of the aspects of it. And kind of to the original point,
Except for the fact that you don't vote by committee.
I mean,
Like the problem is that you're not getting getting that group of people together to talk about and share ideas and discuss and that kind of stuff. I mean, like, what is it? Senate districts are what, 750,000 people or something like that? No. I'm sorry. Those are House of Representatives.
right. Well,
House of
and it's
Representatives are 750,000 people. So if those 750,000 people aren't getting together to have a conversation to try to find truth,
yep.
then it doesn't apply. It breaks. The model
Well,
breaks.
right. Absolutely. And like
So
I mean, that's kind of that's one of the reasons why having people that are interested in understanding this stuff and preferring to vote is important. Um,
that's why I don't believe in vote by mail. I don't think that I
yeah.
don't think I'm okay if you have to do an absentee ballot because that requires effort. You have
Yep.
to send in, request one within a certain amount of time. It has to be able to get to you. You fill it out. You have to send it back by a certain date so that it is received by a certain date. And we broke all of those rules in 2020.
Yes.
I
You get
also, but just mailing votes out, ballots out to people is, I think, an absolute abhorrent way to do that.
yes,
One,
for many
two,
reasons.
yeah, right. It opens it up to fraud so
Opens
wildly.
up to fraud, opens it up to influence.
Hmm.
Like how many people, like instead of having a voting booth where you
But
are able to make a vote unmolested, you're now voting some random location.
are you suggesting that they might be getting molested?
I mean, not in
I mean,
the.
you said in the
I mean,
voting
in
booth
the.
they could vote unmolested, so that would.
I don't mean like molested
I know,
in
I
the
know.
sense of so what some people might think. I mean this in the generic sense. Like I think there was definitely husbands who had their wives looking over their shoulders, being like, "You're voting for that guy," and
Yeah.
that should never happen.
Well,
Now
and
it's on
here's
the
the thing, Nick.
husbands, but
Agreed. But that happens even in regular times. The difference is if you go into a voting booth, you can tell your wife you voted for person A and you voted for person B, and they
right.
won't know the difference.
What they talked about in 2016, the secret Trump
But
voter.
yeah, well, I mean, that regardless of that fact, I mean, I think that everybody should have to verify their identification,
Hmm.
right? Verify who they are so that we know who's voting. Because if you don't do that, then basically at that point anybody can vote.
Well, I would
And that
also
means
like.
citizens,
Yep, yep,
non-citizens.
yep. No, I think you need to have very strong identification requirements. I would also like, and you can do this relatively simply using blockchain technology. I would like to validate that my vote was tallied. You're just shaking your head.
I, yeah, well,
What?
the doing it via blockchain technology, I get that. I don't think we're there yet. I could be wrong.
I mean, I don't think it'd be hard. It might be hard to implement from a like. I don't think it'd be technically hard to implement if that's what you're getting at.
It would be hard for one, the government to do it.
Yeah. Well.
Two, it would be very difficult based on that of how do you keep from having interference, because at that point then you've got humans involved in transferring that from a paper ballot to the blockchain, right? And then
Yeah.
once it's on the blockchain it's basically immutable. So what
Um.
happens if it says, if hypothetically it says that you went in and you voted for person A, it says
So.
you voted for person B, right?
Yep.
How do you go reconcile that?
I mean, there's technically speaking, there's I think three different ways I can think of off the top of my head. Just because it's on the blockchain doesn't mean it's necessarily immutable in the sense that the effects of it can't be changed or undone. Um, if that were the case, then it's just a ledger representing a transaction, and that transaction could be vote, and it could be update vote. And so we add vote, update vote, right? And that update vote can be a different type of transaction that requires very different, very specific protocols, security protocols to do.
Sure.
And so there's ways of technology actually gives us ways of verifying votes anonymously, and so you can know what that your
How?
vote. Um, you could have like the if your vote has a hash to it, right, and you know the hash, you could reference that vote anonymously without like you can check that that vote is counted
In 40 years,
in 40 years. What do you mean?
maybe. Dude,
I mean,
there's no way the boomers are going to be able to,
yeah, no, I get that. I
like,
I'm not talking about the feasibility of the political feasibility of implementing this, because
I, right.
I I think that the biggest problem is government inefficiency in doing that, because there's lots of things that you could do that in around blockchain technology with government that no one has any. It's just not going to happen.
Right, but I mean, like, my point is there's too many people touching that. There's too many touch points, too many opportunities for failure in doing that way, and then that also requires you to follow up, make sure that you check to make sure that your vote went in the way you did, and then it becomes even bigger issue to be able to go change it if you want to go change it.
I mean, even if you can't
And
change it,
that's presuming just the fact that people make mistakes. That's not even assuming that people are inherently bad and
oh
will
sure.
do bad things.
Well, but like that's right. Like right now, I don't know if my vote was cast correctly. Like I don't know that my vote properly went through and was tallied correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So even just having the ability to know that, I think would have some value. Even if you can't change it necessarily that time, if there's a problem and you know about it, sure. And it's the like some of this requires yes paper ballots, but machine generated paper ballots. So you type into a voting machine your votes, it prints out a piece of paper that you can manually verify. Like here's your votes, that sort of thing, and with it are like QR codes and stuff to identify the ballot. And
Okay.
ultimately, this paper is counted.
Right.
And like what's marked on it is the official record.
Okay.
So
Sure. But I mean, that's what we do now,
right. No, I'm
with the exception of having it uploaded to the blockchain.
right. And it anyway, I mean it's I think we got a little off of it. But going back to your point about the mail-in ballots, like that is voting should be an expression of will. And the value of the vote is directly proportional to what degree you need to exert will to vote.
I'm not saying that you need to do that. We need to set it up so that you need to exert a lot of will.
Right.
I think that we need to just set it up so that you have to do something.
Yes.
Now, I also am not completely opposed to, at some age, pick an age, 18, 21, 25, whatever that may be,
Okay.
requiring a civics test in order to be able to vote, to be allowed to vote.
Yeah. In principle, I don't mind it. I'm concerned with
And
how the government can implement it without it becoming problematic.
I agree, but here's the question, right? Like, and here's the civics test that I would implement. We have a civics test already.
Oh, yes, for the immigration. Yeah.
Why would we not just, and here's the deal. You don't want to worry about trying to learn to pass the civics test? No problem. Which means you don't get to vote. I think that most people, I think you'd find how many people opt out of that just because they don't want to have to do that. They don't want to have to go through the hassle of taking the civics test.
Sure.
One. I think another thing that I would add to it is I would require service guarantee citizenship. So
I like it in principle. Like, okay, you need to devote yourself to the community in order to have a say in the community.
I'm not saying that you even have to do that. I'm saying that you have to sign up. Like right now, men have to sign up for selective service and women don't, and they get the right to vote anyway.
Yep. No,
Like,
I
sorry.
I can't see a super obvious problem with that, but I'm skeptical of how the government could implement it and abuse that power.
Implement what and abuse what power?
The selective service.
Okay.
and what that means and how they use it. And, I'm a little skeptical of that. But yeah, I don't know that that is going to have a huge effect, but I think the effect would probably be beneficial. Like sort of what like
Well,
Vivek was talking about a little bit, I think, where it's like, what if you like you don't have to sign up for the selective service, but if you want to
right.
vote, you have to sign up for the selective service.
Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Agreed. That's where honestly, I stole that idea from him. Not
Oh
my
yeah.
not my own. I heard him say that and I was like, that's not a bad idea. You know what? I could get on board with that.
Like I'm inclined to agree with that. That seems fairly reasonable. I'm a little
I would bet
skeptical is all.
I would bet that you get probably weed out 50% of people just
Yep.
because they don't want to have to sign up.
Well, and it like part of it's like
And
I'm already signed up for the selective service, so it's sort of like, okay, well,
well, no, if
would
we
that
did
really
that, I
change?
would say you'd start over
Oh no, I know, but like it wouldn't feel like a change in status quo if like, yeah,
for
okay,
you.
I don't have to sign. Yeah, it'd be
So
like, okay, well,
what you could
now
do
I'm
is you
signed
could
up for it. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. That's what I'm saying.
right, but you could revoke that.
I know, I know,
That's what I'm saying. Like you could revoke it, but
I
you'd
know.
have to give up your right to vote. But that
Right. I
it
don't
gives you.
think that.
I get that you don't. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the next generations that come up. Right?
Sure.
You're going to see a huge difference because a lot of those people won't necessarily want to do that. And here's the other thing: all the warmongers that are in Congress, they're not going to send their want to send. And here's the other thing: no exemptions. I don't care if you're going to college. I don't care if you got this. I don't care if you're going playing. I don't care what it is. There are no exemptions, which means if Congress declares war and we decide to start doing a draft, that guess what? Everybody's boys and girls get to go.
Oh,
This isn't. There's no draft dodging. There's none of that.
I mean, if yeah, like
You get
it's
called up, you
more
go.
if you have a like you do something where it's like, well, we need your skills in the war effort, right? Like it, but there's got to be a way that they can draft you and use those skills as a soldier.
What do you mean?
Like okay, if you're a welder and you need to build ships, right, and you're working for a shipbuilding company, let's say, like a la World War II,
Sure.
and it's like, okay, we need you are a master welder and we are short welders, and you're drafted. Okay, well maybe that means that you're drafted into the welding corps or something,
I
and you
never
work
said
on
that the.
ships.
I never said that the draft meant you were going to the front lines to go get shot.
Oh, I know, but like that's the sort of the things that they had exceptions for. I'm just kind of clarifying how I agree with you, and this is how
Gotcha.
you can get around some of those typical and justified exceptions, right?
Right.
Oh, we need your skill. You're going to school for a skill we need. Okay, well, here we're going to put you in a job working for the war effort, and you are going to work for the war effort and go to school part time.
Guess what? The school will still be there when this war's over with.
Sure, and
But
maybe it's
you
yeah,
signed up of your own volition, right? Nobody forced you to, unlike
right,
today where people like you and I are forced to sign up.
right,
You signed up of your own volition to because you wanted the right to vote. Not a problem, but that means that you're selective service. That may mean that you're just a cook on a ship somewhere. It
and
may mean that you have to work in the canning factory that cans rations that we send overseas. But that also means that male, female, boy, girl, I don't care. You may get put on the front lines.
yeah, I mean, there's arguments whether the women should be serving in the front lines or not.
I
But
I agree.
there's still plenty of things they could be doing as a service to this country in a time of war. No, I think it seems pretty good. I'm a little worried how it might be abused, but I can't. There's no immediate obvious problem with that. I think it seems fairly reasonable, and I think that
But I mean,
if you
how would you abuse it? Let's try to flesh that out. I'd be intrigued.
something
I
like
have not. I've
you,
thought about it some, and there's going to be some abuse of it. Like that's human nature.
mhm.
But as a general rule, I don't see. I have not been able to flesh out an idea in my own head of how you would abuse it.
The closest one I can think of is corruption within the military organization to funnel certain people into safe jobs and certain people into dangerous ones. And you use war repeatedly to remove political dissidents.
Sure.
Like that's the closest thing I can come up from. You just use war becomes more frequent, and now you have this way of directly affecting the voting population.
Okay.
It seems a bit weak though. Like it doesn't seem like it's a very strong force.
Well, I mean, we spent the last 200 years sending the poor and impoverished children of this country to war.
Right.
Maybe it's time we send a few of the
Well, let's be honest. I don't
rest
think
of the citizenry.
I don't foresee generals being too inclined to send political elites' kids to go over and die when they're trying to gain like office positions in Washington. But I don't think you could. I don't think there's any way to fully stop that. This, I think, I mean, at the very least, this is one of those things where,
Could turn it into a lottery.
well, I mean, I don't know that you like. I think I think it should be a lottery. I think a lot more of this should be lottery. Like, all right, if like enforcing blind determination of who gets what MOS. So you don't get a name, you just get attributes and recommendations. And you can say, well, this, these people, the commander is going to recommend it based on him being the, politician's son and trying to curb favor. But I think if it's not like, if you don't necessarily know
if you turn it into a lottery, then it gives the command the opportunity to be like, I have nothing to do with it. I don't control that.
Right.
Their number got pulled.
Right.
So,
and it's one of those things, and that's the other thing, is it's like, he's like, I gave recommendations, I can't guarantee it, and you make it so the recommendations are secret. Like you don't know, like you can't somehow determine who gave what the recommendation, only that the recommendation was given to this soldier, like, or not even this soldier, but this lottery number or something. But
no, because then you're trying to influence the outcome.
Well, no, but I mean, you to some extent you should, because you want to some extent assign people with the right skills to the right MOS.
I mean, to a certain extent, I agree with you. But if we're going to make this fair, the only way to make it fair and to take the human element out of it is to make it a lottery.
And I think there can definitely be a lottery component, but I think we do need to put I'm putting people with the skills in the right position. I think may be more important than ensuring that every politician's son is put in harm's way, potentially.
I'm not saying that
I don't know, but
every one of their sons would be put in harm's way.
Well,
but I can guarantee you, if you do not do a lottery, that none of their sons, unless they insist and volunteer, will ever be put in harm's way.
Sure,
because that's historically how it's always happened.
Well, and I'm envisioning a situation where you're doing a little bit of rank scoring on people's fit for different duty stations. And you don't know their name, you don't know the identity when assigning the duty stations, you just know the relevant information about what skills they have.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
but I think, how about this? I think that the military would disagree with you and would be offended that you don't think that they can train anybody to do any job in the military that needs to be trained to do that.
I mean, if that's the case, then I'm wrong about how they do things. I thought they did a lot of selection along with training. They'd like pick people with aptitude for things, but maybe I'm wrong. In which case, yeah, lottery.
To some extent, they do some of that, but like a lot of people, the only way you really see a lot of those people get picked for is if you score high ASVAB, right?
Oh, sure.
If you take the ASVAB and you score super high, they may give you a different. But there are guys, I've known guys that have gotten good ASVAB scores, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can do this, or you can do this, you can do this. Get in. Guess what your MOS is?
Oh, is it
infantry?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it's 11
Here's a
Bravo.
gun. Have fun. Like,
Well,
seriously?
and
Like,
and the reality is, especially in as things are right now, we need more infantry than we need like whatever most other MLSs, because those are the large number boot kickers, right? At least my understanding. And in time of war, that's probably the case. Is those guys are the like we already have radio operators, we already have these people that are skilled. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's generally a good way of doing it, and I think if
and don't
we
get me
further
wrong. I
allow,
think
I think you should be allowed to rescind your selective service, like 2 years after your last vote. So if you want to no longer be, but you also are eligible to not, you're no longer eligible to vote at that point either.
oh, I think you. Yeah, I mean,
Right? Like if you decide that you just want to withdraw and don't want to participate anymore, or you
I say that it has to be longer than that.
longer than 2 years after your last vote,
I would do something like 6.
6 years. So you have to not vote for 6 years to rescind the selective service enlistment. Okay. I mean, because I'm just thinking of it like Congress has to declare war, right? So as long as you voted for the Congress that declared war, what's your complaint?
Right.
And so it's every 2 years that you elect a new Congress.
You
Yeah.
you only turn a third of those.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like it's a new Congress, so
You can.
yeah.
I mean, you can say that, but it's like, are you talking about Senate or House? Because that's completely different.
Well, I mean, it's House has to approve it too, right? So you have every 2 years you have the opportunity to vote for somebody that could help stop you from going to war.
Right.
And
But I think if you voted for a senator and they have a 6-year term,
okay.
then
So once once the people that you have voted for have
have completed the term that you voted them in for,
yeah.
then you can rescind. How about that?
Okay. Okay.
So if you don't vote for senator and you
Right.
don't vote for president, but you're voting for House of Representatives,
Right.
then you could rescind in 2 years.
Right.
But if you
Okay.
voted for your senator
And he
at the same
votes.
time you voted for your House of Representatives, and here's the
We'd
problem.
have to
The
tweak it a
problem
little bit because
is,
you'd have to get like
how do
different.
you
You'd have to
know?
remove certain ballots
You have
and record that. I don't think it'd
you
be
have
that hard to change though.
you'd have hidden ballot. You have hidden ballots. And so you couldn't do that.
What would you do is you get a ballot that doesn't have certain sections on it. You'd have to make like variable ballots, which
I think it's
isn't
better
that
to just
hard, but
do a 6 year, call it a day.
6 year. Yeah. Yeah. I mean 6 years. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
So after 6 years, then you can rescind your selective service, but that also means that you don't get to vote.
Yep. And you have
Cool.
to sign up for selective service again before you can vote. So if you just do not trust Congress anymore, you don't think there's any good options, and
And
you
better
think
than that, you have to notify of the fact that you're rescinding your right to vote, or that you're intending to rescind your selective service and therefore your right to vote at least a year ahead of any federal election. That way you can be
so
taken off of the voter rolls so that you
yes,
can't
okay,
vote.
right. You need to allow enough time to be rescinded from voter rolls.
Yep.
Prior to it expiring.
Mm-hmm.
So at least 6 years must have passed, and you must give enough notice to remove you from the voter rolls.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's upon confirmation of removal from the voter rolls, are you no longer eligible for the Selective Service?
Right.
I like it.
So whoever's in charge of the voter rolls should send you a receipt saying, "Hey, we've received your notice. We've taken you off the voter rolls." It has to be because I don't, and you could adjust that depending on how, because I know that you can get like absentee ballots in advance,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know how far in advance. And so I think the
Right.
easy thing is to say you have to, and
Well,
I'm not saying that you have to be completely off the voter rolls a year ahead of time. I'm saying that you have to have served notice that you want to be removed from voter rolls at least a year ahead of time, which means it's easy to do. Like you fill out a piece of paper online, mail it in, and just get you a make it
right.
certified.
Right. And it's basically upon like receipt of that, there will like, because if the state doesn't process it properly, that doesn't mean you're still on the hook.
Right.
Right. It's one, but they have to like, you have to confirm receipt of this notice, basically.
Right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because that could be, yeah. Um,
Right. But that's easy, right? So
oh
okay,
yeah.
no problem. I have a receipt showing that I mailed in the form.
Right.
They show receipt of the form.
Right.
So you've got to be, if you seriously don't want to be available for selective service, you also have to be serious enough to go do these things.
Well, and I would actually
Done.
I would like to extend this sort of selective service model down to different levels. So like if selective service is for federal military service, but I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
see more like state and local corps for various service elements, right?
The problem that you're going to run into is that if you get war declared, right, you're
But
going to have conflicts.
well, and so I'm not thinking about war service necessarily. I'm thinking more like, um,
I know, but if a war is declared at a federal level and you're in service to the state at the time, and you get called up on a federal level,
okay, I see your
that
point.
supersedes, so you have to go.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm just thinking of like, because like these sort of volunteer corps and stuff should be more. I think it'd be slightly different at the state level than the the federal level. But I'm just thinking there should be some aspect of the same kind of getting people involved locally.
I don't. I think it's a good idea. I don't think it works in practice.
Yeah.
I would rather people volunteer their own time. Now, I think be a good idea to have like some sort of work program type thing, volunteer program to get like say tax benefits, tax cuts.
Right. If you donate to the time and effort to the community, then no property taxes. If you donate enough time and on your home, right?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, or certain percentage of whatever, right? Like you can either apply it to choose to apply it to this. Like you get a tax coupon
sure.
for the state of Texas. You can apply it to this. You can apply it to that. You can do that. Whatever
Right, right.
those may
Yeah, that
be.
makes
I mean,
sense.
like it's kind of the problem is like Texas doesn't have a state income tax, right?
Hmm.
So the only thing you can do is apply it to property tax. Well, that doesn't apply if you're a renter, if you don't own property.
Right.
So that's a problem.
Right.
So how else do you incentivize it? And my thought is like I think there are a lot of people. The reason I think this is a good idea is I think there are a lot of people out there who don't have jobs, don't
Hmm.
have anything to do,
Right.
and it's a good way to get some work out of them, something done.
Yeah.
Because I think the systems are abused drastically.
Yeah. I mean,
I know they are.
I mean, like I think in some ways, I'm just thinking about. I'm trying to run this forward in my head, and I just had this thought that maybe the like investing in your local community is not the panacea we thought it is or think it is. Because I'm just trying to think like to what you're saying, like the renter and whatever, the guy who's superficially part of the community. Like, is that going to fix things? Like, is that really going to address a problem that we have? I don't know. I
I'm
mean,
I'm not in your head, and I'm not sure I'm following what your thought process is there, buddy.
okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay,
I mean,
so we've got somebody who's a renter,
well,
and
like
they're
somebody who's
kind of part of your community, but you
well, and
said
it's
like superficial part of your community. So are you saying that they're not truly part of your community?
if they don't have like they don't have a lot of ownership and a lot of ability and potentially not a lot of ability to commute um, to contribute to the community or gain much
Okay,
from the community, let's say. Like, is
which one? To contribute
both
or to gain from?
both. I'm thinking both because they
Okay,
may not. If you have, let's say, like not every renter is going to be the same,
okay.
but more hypothetically, like you could
So
have somebody that just can't take advantage of what the community has to offer in a meaningful way.
roll forward. I got
And
you. I just
I
wanted
think
to
there's
clarify.
and so I'm not sure. Like, and I was thinking about it, and I felt like, man, that does feel like that's the big problem is people like that. And a lot of communities that just aren't involved as much. And I'm just wondering if there is a I'm 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 looking at that as kind of the problem here because you're talking about like you should the community only be the people that participate in the community? Like we're talking about the people that volunteer time.
I mean, I think we're talking about our in my head scary place. I think we're talking about two different communities, right? Like I think originally at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about like building our communities, right?
Yeah, and maybe and then I
And
think maybe I'm
so
just running away with it. I thought that
I,
I thought was more related that
I
as it evolves isn't.
okay, I think you're on the right track. I kind of agree with you. I think there are plenty of people out there like that. What I'm saying is, I think there are, but what I'm trying to address with this, I guess,
Hmm.
is that I think that there are people out there who don't have the ability necessarily to contribute to the community a lot, but that a are truly a part of the community and want to be part of the community, but they just
Right.
don't have a lot to offer, and you
Sure.
usually see that along the lines of the younger crowd, right?
Well,
Now
and that's who I had in mind, right?
yeah, and there are some people who like they don't ever want to own property. They just want to rent, which is fine. But they still have a good sense of community and a that feeling of community. And so I don't
Right.
want to exclude those people either. I think
That's
the
fair.
people who don't want to be part of the community will self-exclude themselves. Like they'll
Yeah.
self-deselect. And so I don't know that they're that big of an issue. But you know what? If they're willing to clean up trash in the city park to get some sort of rebate on their whatever, then fine, I'm okay with it. Like hopefully that act, my goal and the reason I would do this is because that act I think would help try to bring them to be part of the community,
Yeah.
because then they're cleaning it up. So if they see somebody just throwing crap on the ground, like, hey man, I just cleaned that up, bro. Like, please
Right.
don't do that. Okay.
Right.
So now they've got owners, some semblance of ownership to it. And also,
Yeah.
I mean, like one of the things that I found whenever I get out and do volunteer work is you meet other people. You end up
Right.
having conversations with them, with people that you may have never met
Right.
in your normal life. And especially if it's more community based, I think that's a very good thing. Now,
Sure.
ooh, I got an idea. I have an idea how to fix that problem.
Okay.
It is a property tax rebate.
Okay.
That coupon, if you're a renter, to redeem it, you give it to your landlord.
He must take it in exchange for rent. Right.
And so he can now use that at his end of year tax return
Right.
to cover part of.
Right. Right.
So it,
You
it
you pass a
passes
law that,
through.
and he has to honor it as is payment for rent.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, one of the problems with why our communities have become so fractured, at least in my opinion, is that there's a lot of communities that do not serve the younger people well,
Sure.
and so it's like, how do you? And some of it's like it's hard to serve them because their needs are stuff that's hard to manifest.
What do you mean serve them well?
Um, address their concerns is kind of the another way of phrasing it at the high level, but that would often mean like
Specific examples.
uh, um, their concerns and needs are going to be things like, well, I need to be able to have a job that isn't a not dead end job, a job that can lead into a career and can lead into something. I need an opportunity, basically, to work hard in a way that has a future.
Okay.
And communities can't just manifest industry, because that's really what provides that is some kind of industry, let's say.
Sure. But
Um,
that's not part of the community, I don't think.
what is not part of the community?
Your job.
I mean,
That's not the community's, or I would argue that's not the community's job to provide that opportunity for you.
I'm
Whereas I think that a lot of communities do actually cater to the younger crowd. There are a lot of areas that are designed around younger people that want to rent because they want it cheaper than buying,
mhm,
or they don't want to be required to deal with the whole pain of owning anything. And so
sure.
they actually designed communities around what the younger people are telling them they want. I think part of the problem is is that the younger people don't know the right things to want.
Yes, and that I actually I agree with that completely, because what I'm getting at is not what the younger people say they want, but what the younger people actually want. And I'm not saying it is the community's responsibility to provide those things, but
Well,
it's sort of one of those things that if you don't have, if the community is not addressing your needs very well, there's sort of a question of what is the value of the community to you.
I would argue that most of the younger crowd tends to only question what the community, the city, the state, the country what can give to them, and not what they're doing to give to that community.
Well, and I don't totally fault them on that, because there is an aspect of, because I've seen this a lot with sort of more locally growing up, was the resentment of the, not, I guess, kind of the younger teens and kids and adults
For what?
in, for the, just as their interests weren't aligned with the interest, like they didn't match the interests of the suburban families,
Okay.
but they still lived there because that's where they were, and so that there was sort of a
But I mean,
rejection of them.
okay. But that's now, is this teens or adults?
It's both. It was sort of bimodal around the post high school, like 18 to 20 year olds, as well as the like 13 to 16 year olds, but it was sort
Okay.
of kind of a
So
bimodal distribution there.
the 13 to 16-year-olds are there because that's what their parents bought and that's where they live.
Right. Well, it's oftentimes they've lived there since they were little kids. Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
So So you'll forgive me when they pay for their own stuff, then they get to choose their surroundings,
Okay.
right?
That's my point is you
Hang on.
okay.
The 18 to 20-year-olds, likely it's the same thing. They're moving back in with mommy and daddy. They're not buying those houses in suburbia, are they?
No, no, they're not moving back in. They have graduated high school and they're trying to live their lives. But they're not.
But still living with mom and dad?
Some are. A lot of them are trying to get out and get their own apartments. Part of the issue is the community is not set up for people with the post high school, even post college income levels. And
Okay.
but the only work they have is in that area, and so they're trying to make it work with either living at home because that's easy to do.
I mean, okay.
Like it's but ultimately I'm not sure what you're getting, because my point is that if you want to build a community, particularly a multi-generational community that isn't temporary, because that's how you, I mean, I would assume that's how most people would get people to invest long term in new communities, make it something that you can establish over potentially multiple generations. Then, if you are rejecting these people, why should they give back to the community, right? If that's
Okay. So it that okay. So let me clarify. What I'm talking about is people who have chosen to be where they're at.
okay,
Okay. So if they've chosen to be where they're at, wherever they live, whatever they got, an apartment or whatever,
okay,
then yeah, they then they are become part of the community. And actually, I would argue if they don't like the community, if it doesn't serve them, then they're not part of the community. Now,
right.
is can there be problems associated with that? Yes, I think so. But I also don't think that you need to cater. I think it's a bad idea to cater to 13 to 20-year-olds into what we're going to do with what the community is.
Well, I'm not at the risk of being presumptuous about what you mean by cater. I don't think they should be catering, but I think it's important to design a community that offers something for a wide age range of people.
Sure,
Um, and
but suburbia is not it.
no, I'm not saying suburbia is it. I'm more pointing to that as a sort of a negative case study of how they are rejecting people and not providing that, right?
Well, but that's
Like,
not who it was. Right, but that's not who it was built for either.
oh,
It's not designed to be an inclusive
sure,
community.
sure.
And so
That's a little bit my
and so
point.
I think that it is sure, but I think I just don't think it's a good. I don't think it's a good to say, well, this isn't a good. This doesn't do this well. Well, yeah, because it wasn't designed to do that well.
Oh,
It was never the thought process.
I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable to point at things that weren't designed to do things to show that why they're bad at it. Um, you
Okay,
don't,
well then
you're not,
maybe my issue is that maybe you should preface that with
okay,
like, hey, here's a good case study. Suburbia was not built to be inclusive of several generations, and because of that, what we're seeing is these levels leaving because you know, see what I'm saying? Like, because otherwise it was like I was really confused as to where you were going with it, and it took I think a lot longer for
okay.
us to get there.
I'm, yeah, yeah. I mean, my initial premise was they are, if you have somebody who is not, if you have somebody who isn't welcome, if you have a community that doesn't cater to you, why should you give back to it? It's basically the premise to it. I don't know that it matters whether or not this community is designed to do that or not. If the community isn't set up to take care of you, why should you give back to it?
You shouldn't.
Okay.
I don't I don't know why. I guess I don't understand why you're making that argument because I don't get it.
Oh, well, I mean, I thought you had said that you should be asking what you can give back to your community, not what the community can do for you.
And as a general rule, yes. But here's the deal. Those people are not really part of that community. They're part of that community by proxy.
Sure. No,
And
I would
a
agree with
lot
that.
of people choose not to be part of the community. I was trying, like, here's the deal. I get it that there are people that are ostracized and are not included in communities. I'm talking about, if we're talking about building communities, right? The
Mhm.
children don't get a say in it,
That's generally true. Yeah.
right? And in general, like, if I built a community, right, from scratch. Now, I think that there needs I'm a strong believer in starting housing, right?
Yep.
In starter
Yep.
homes, something that you can own, but I also think that you need to understand, and I don't know how to do this well. I think that you need to understand that there's only so much time you can stay there, and you're expected to move to something bigger. Like, you're supposed to
Right.
move, that is
Stepping
supposed to
stones.
be a stepping stone to give you that, right?
Yep.
And so I don't know of a good, I haven't been able, I haven't, I say be able, I haven't honestly taken the time to flesh that out well as to how to make that work well. Because I
It,
think that there's a good opportunity there. And I think really you should have a community that is kind of mixed, but is also kind of segregated. And
along what lines?
by by kind of where you are along your journey,
Right. So kind of
right? Like, I don't think
um
you should put the starter houses all in one section by themselves and
right.
then go to, like, this street is all starter houses, and then this street is the next step up, and then this street, like, then it becomes like a class type thing. And I don't think that's good. But I think there does need to be a certain level of segregation, because then you what you basically do is, I think it's more along like, what do they call it in, like, car painting, where they like blending,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
No, I was
like,
gonna say
you
there's
start kind of blending the next level up into that lower group, and vice versa, so that they are getting to interact with people who are at the next level, so they
right.
understand where that gets to go. But then you're also surrounded by a lot of people who are on that same level with you.
Right. It's there's competing forces. There's advantage of being around people at your same level that can do the same things as you, but you also want to be able to like you need to have that continuum of level, right?
Right.
And that creates a very healthy what we call middle class, which case creates a very healthy economy.
Right.
No, I absolutely agree. What I was getting at is
Ah,
like if you, I mean, I think this is like you were coming from the point of like you've already found that a community is going to have value, if I'm correct, that you've said someone
yeah,
who's
that's
chose the
that's what I was
community.
thinking that we were talking about. I was confused.
Right when you
So
would, yeah,
it's fine.
okay. When you had said you shouldn't be asking this, I'm like, well, you need to start from the position of this is what the community can do for you, because that's the ultimate, like the pitch is the community is supposed to provide you with value, and in turn, you're supposed to devote some of your time, effort, and energy towards the community. This is actually how all human relationships work, regardless of individual or social.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I
Like,
was thinking that we were starting with the premise of a community that you chose, a place that you chose to live within,
right.
and that I think that everybody should not only do that, but then they should start building and becoming trying to work to be part of it.
I was
Not
operating
like those people that get, like, unfortunately, like kids, like, I'm sorry, like, you just get stuck where you get stuck. Like,
what, and I was operating of sort of the typical person in the modern era, which I think there's a lot of communities that don't offer anything for a good portion of
and
people's like
and honestly,
life patterns.
yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And honestly, I don't agree. I don't consider those communities, because they're not.
Yep. No, I agree, and I think and that's kind
Like,
of what I
I
was.
know all of my neighbors, right? Like, I know them. Now, how many people can go out into a general neighborhood like what I live in and say that they know their neighbors in today's world?
I mean, it's a little different here because I kind of get the feeling of like I only know a couple of my neighbors, but there's very much of like a we're all band together. We all want to just be left alone.
Well, in fairness, like, you're more rural.
Right.
Whereas I'm in the middle of the city, and
Right.
everybody's got, quarter-acre lot, maybe,
Right. Right. Yes.
you know,
It's the same principle, but looks very different.
like I
Um,
remember whenever I was younger, we knew most of the people on the street, and now I can go to that same neighborhood and bet money that most of the people on the street don't have any idea who their neighbors are. They don't know who each of them are, and that is a separation of society that I think we've seen. And
mhm.
so, like I said, I don't consider those communities because they don't act like communities.
I agree.
Now, I think it would be good if they did, and then they need to also, part of that I think is discussing these things like what you and I are talking about, of like, okay, how do we involve the elderly in the community? How do we involve the youth in the community? Because the elderly, like, you need those people, like they're part of your, like they're part of family and part of community. They need to be involved. The
What?
youth is your future,
Mhm.
and especially your children. Like, there needs, you, you need to give them something to do. There needs to
Well,
be productive, or at least just like energetic things that they can do, so that you don't have them, because otherwise they're stuck in front of a screen.
I'm pretty sure there's actually a term for this. I believe they're called third spaces. And you have home and you have work, and then there's the third space is where a space where you just hang out.
Oh, okay.
So
I've not heard that term before,
they
but
they
that's
they
fair.
it's I don't know how new it is, but something they talk about like pubs in Europe, these like beer gardens in Germany and stuff. I think was one.
Sure.
I'm I'm guessing because I've never been to Germany. But the sort of these sort of spaces where they're community hangouts that you can just kind of be, relax, hang out, and like it shouldn't the part of the issue is like it can't be a big burden. It can't be like someplace where you need to be can't have a high expense to it,
Sure.
right? And that's part of the issue is parks used to be that. Now they're not. You can just hang out in the park. Well, parks close at sunset. So what is the kid supposed to do when like he wants to hang out with his friends at night?
They should be home.
Maybe. I mean, I don't actually know that that's true. Like there seems to be
Really?
significant evidence that there is, and I mean, I'm talking about teenagers here, that there is a bit of a rite of passage of kind of the being out late at night and doing your own thing in your teen years. I don't know for
Maybe
sure though.
maybe
It is
instead of we allowing that to be a rite of passage, because that's what we've done essentially, is allowed that to become the rite of passage. What if hypothetically, just saying, we reinstituted rites of passage for people?
oh, yep. Oh, agree. I mean, it's there needs to be something where, but part of it is these teenagers need to be able to be like adults separate from their parents. They need not truly adults, but they need to kind of start to be able to form social interactions separate from their parents, friendships separate from their family. Like they need to be able to have some of this socializing that's done outside of the oppressive structure of the community.
Sure. And they should be able to do that at the park or playground.
Right. And some of it is like
That's going to be up to the parents. That's a societal, or that kind of issue. It's a cultural thing. That's not going to be, you're not going to solve that by building something within the community that's like, oh, a community. I mean, maybe building a community center might be the case, but uh, I think
it's
I think you could do the same thing by having
if
a park playground that's lit till 11.
yeah, right, midnight even. Like it is it's not so I don't think so much it's new facilities. I think it's changing the way you it's adjusting rules, right? And it's adjusting like a lot of communities have parks.
Okay.
Like but you
Yeah.
know,
So you're talking about like letting the park stay open later.
right. Let the park be a hangout ground for older kids Like I'm just thinking, so like in the Chicago area, dark during the winter, it's like 6 p.m.
How'd you get to 6 p.m.? Dude, dark here in the winter is 5.
Well, like I mean, like dark, but
Yeah,
maybe earlier. Now that I think about it,
it should be.
might be me
Like,
earlier.
if you look at,
Yeah,
so winter solstice is December 21st.
right.
And like, yeah, it'll be dark, like dark at 5. And
No,
I
I
know
don't.
that because I used to drive to work in the dark and drive home in the dark every day.
See, I'm just thinking about. Well, maybe I did. I thought it was
Now it's not like that for
dusk.
very long.
Yeah, maybe it's a couple days like that. I'm just trying to remember. I'm like, oh, no, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember like walking out of work and it being
It's not
dark.
like 6 months of it. It's like maybe a month or 2 weeks,
Yeah,
because
and
the
maybe
days
I
start
left a little
getting
bit earlier.
shorter and shorter, and then they start getting longer and longer.
And now I
And
think about
if you do things after work, right? Like
right,
if you go to that pub after work, then you don't
right.
notice it because
Yeah, it's
you're
dark out
essentially
anytime.
just going someplace else and you're thinking about that. And
No, I'm just trying to because I would have to walk from work to the train station. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was always like duskish, but
but in
I
Chicago, that would
might
always
have
be
been
like
leaving at
super well lit,
4:30.
wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it was like you could still tell whether it was like the city lights versus like light. Like it was still sunlight ish.
Maybe.
Um, but anyway, the point being like, yeah, okay, so oftentimes parks close after dark. Like that's just the rules of it. It's when it's dark out, the park's closed.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are these kids gonna do between like they want to socialize, they want to hang out. They don't have a lot of money because no one does, and really you don't want them to because it usually means they're just getting the money from their parents, which is not a skill set you want. Like that's not the way they should be getting money.
Right.
You want them
And
to have.
I agree with you. I think that's, but so do you have parents take rotation on security? Do you hire outside security? Because
For what scenario?
you need some sort of security there.
At the park?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you can hire. I mean, some of it's going to be the culture of the security or police that you hire there.
It'll depend regionally and depending on where you're at, what city it is, all that kind of fun stuff. Like the city, like where I grew up, you probably didn't even have to have, you probably wouldn't have had to have security. Where I live now, I guarantee you I would not send my kids down to the local park to go hang out after dark
Right.
without security.
What and some of this can just be
Period.
make it well lit. Make it well lit.
Both. It needs to be both.
Well, yeah, sure, and like well lit plus enforced is gonna clean it up.
Right.
And it could just be simply like you hire some security guards that aren't cops, and they're just
Or you hire cops. Part of their job is to just go by there and make sure that like nothing nefarious is going on.
sure,
Right? Like you're not there to crack down on them doing this or doing that or whatever. Like you're there to make sure that they are safe. You don't
right,
need to bother them. You just need to have a presence so that bad actors will go do something else somewhere else.
right. You're basically trying to prevent people from preying on them,
Correct.
right? If they want to get into stupid shit, let them get into a little bit of stupid shit.
Well, and if they want to get into really stupid shit, they're going to. Like that's
Yes,
just going to happen. I don't care what
yes.
you think, how good you think you taught
Well,
your
and
kid.
that's
That's going
how
to
these
happen if they want to. So
that's how
you
these
might
third
as well,
spaces disappeared for kids.
right.
Is
So you
people
might as
kept
well let them go. Like if you've got like I mean, it's amazing to me how they'll have like basketball courts, well lit areas, right? Now the key is it can't just be that the basketball court is well lit. It means that everything around the basketball court has to be well lit also.
But yeah, if you
But
have a big
it's
sports
amazing how
complex
that,
and park that like
yeah,
is sure like and you're going to have darker areas, okay, well have the police preferentially patrol the darker areas.
in today's world, cameras are cheap.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an issue of cameras is that now you can't, it's hard to look the other way with cameras, and you may need to look the other way at times.
Maybe.
But again, that's going to
But
have to be a community decision to some extent, but you need to be.
the other thing is, like, you can put cameras on, like, here's the deal. Put cameras on entrances and exits.
Yes.
And dark areas, put cameras on dark areas with IR.
Yeah.
So stay, like, you don't want to be on camera? No problem. Stay out of these dark areas.
Yeah.
If you go over there, you're going to be on camera, and I can't do anything about it if you decide to go do that. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're going to put cameras and put them clearly marked, like don't be like,
No.
we're trying to catch you.
No, absolutely not. It's like, hey, this is for safety reasons. This area is dark. We can't light it well. But what we can do is I can put a camera up here with IR on it.
Right.
So understand, if you're in that area, you're going to be on camera.
Sure.
Period.
And it's the...
Make a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's... You have to figure out the exact rules based on the community.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's...
I think there's lots of good options. I don't know if...
Well, sure.
I don't know that there's any one right answer, and I think it will be different based on the locale.
The idea is you want to let these kids try some risky-ish things safely. When I say risky, I mean it's more risky for them because they're new at it.
I don't even know that you necessarily need to, like, I don't even know that it's a thing of risky things. It's more of, to me, it's more of that they get the feeling that they're getting away with something, right? Because they get to stay out after dark. They get to go hang out with their friends. And yeah, there's a cop over there, but he doesn't, like, yo, bro, the cop doesn't mess with us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure it's getting away with something. It's I get to start exerting my own will on my own life. Because I don't know.
I think that's your thought. I think that's your mindset on it.
Well, I'm not saying
that matters a lot to you.
Well, I think a lot of it's expressed that way, where it's that, yeah, we're getting away with stuff.
Maybe.
Like it's like, yeah, man, we can do what we want. And a lot of it's the proof of getting away, like the proof of being able to do what you want is being able to do stuff that you're not supposed to do.
But I mean,
your parents tell me you're not supposed to do. Like that's
sure. But the reason I argue against that is because I see people do that all the time in their lives till the day they die.
Sure. Some people
like there are places I would bet money that you could argue most people
do what? Stuff that they shouldn't to get a
just like because I can get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
there's places in this world that they put 55-mile-an-hour speed limits up that nobody's doing less than 60 or 65.
Okay. Yes. Yeah,
I've seen I swear there was a place that I went to that had a 32-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. Not kidding.
Okay.
And it worked for the most part. Because people would go 35. They felt like they were getting away with something going 35 because they're breaking the rules.
Yeah.
But they're still within. And the reason I say that is this is the same trick that I say trick, but the same thought process that I used whenever my nephews were young.
Okay.
And so what I would do is I would say, okay, and I don't have a good example of this. Well, okay. So being like at like the outlet malls, right? Okay. So they were at this point they're young, right? Like maybe 4 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so, right, like everybody knows, like they can stay within. I mean, as a general rule, they can stay within 10, 12 feet And most parents are like, that's fine. It's cool. Right.
Okay.
That's kind of a general. So what I would do is I would say, like, I would set the boundary of like, hey, you need to stay within 25, 30 feet of me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, and part of that, with the caveat that I have to be able to see you. Right.
Right.
And so say I said 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you got room to, like, they're kids. Go play. Have fun.
Right. Right.
Goof off. Knowing full well that I'm okay with them going out to 35 feet, 40 feet safely,
Sure.
as long as, again, I can see them. They're within eyesight.
Right.
And so they would you can watch this in real time. They would slowly go past that 20 foot, little further, little further, little further. And what I would do is when they got to that 40 foot and they went past that, then I would, nope, you've got to come back. But they didn't get to come back into that ring. They got brought all the way back to the 20-foot mark. And they'd have to play in that area for a little while and then slowly get to a bigger area. And what they would do is they'd figure out there's this zone that they can play in, right?
Right. Right.
And I think that's kind of what you're talking about is like,
yeah,
they need to figure them where those guardrails are safely in a semi-controlled environment.
Right. I think that is a great analogy, because they need to know where the zone is they can play in society.
Right.
And so creating an environment where they can play, it's up to them to play. They're not like being, they don't have the structure of society telling them what to do. They have just sort of free form. And then you're just kind of giving, here is the realm in which you can play.
Right.
Because the reality is society has a lot of structures that tell you what to do that have basically are a late stage iteration of this game.
Does it?
It's supposed to.
Oh, sorry. I ignore most all of those just as a general rule.
Well, but
it's probably not best for me to probably be teaching my nephews, because
actually,
they might learn a few bad habits.
Well, but you use a lot of these structures.
Sure.
You use the fact that these structures exist. You are playing around these structures.
Well, and you learn, what is it? It's in the Matrix. Morpheus.
Oh,
he tells Neo, he's like, you learn which rules you can bend,
and which ones,
and which rules you can break.
Yep. I mean, and that's kind of it. You start to figure out here. You give them a simple game.
That's the reality of world.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the reality of any human construct. You give them an environment they can play in, and it's kind of like an early stage game, a little bit similar to the greater world. And so the meta game they just need to learn the base game first. And then when they come into the real world, you see like the meta games that have been created, the various structures and rules of how to interact in different environments. The corporate environment is one of those meta games.
I mean, in reality, the game itself never really changes. The rules and the scope of the playing field, those are what change.
Right. And so you're trying to teach them that base game first.
Yeah.
And that's why these like third spaces where they can just be in that base game are very important. And that's what makes them feel part of the community.
Well, and there could also be an argument to be made that if parents are not absent from their children's lives, as most parents are these days, that they're teaching those things without just allowing their kids to learn it all on their own, which is essentially what those spaces allow for.
I mean, they need both, right? Like they need to be able to, like they're missing one of them a lot more than they're missing the other one. I think they don't have the parents are not introducing the game to them. I think they have more third spaces available to them that they've sort of forcefully created than they do have parents introducing the game to them.
Oh, absolutely. And in fairness, like those third spaces are not good third spaces for them.
And
They're
part
not,
of it is these
because
other,
they don't see the need for it.
well, and yes,
The
and part,
parents don't see the need for it. Yeah.
well, kids
Just for
obviously don't
clarification.
understand. Kids don't
They don't
consciously
understand
see
that
the
this is
need.
a game. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
They don't realize that it's a game and that they're playing whether they like it or
right,
not.
right, right.
Better figure out the rules and what the scope of it is.
Right. Well, yeah. Oh yeah, it's a game
It's
of
like
power.
playing
The only
Mario
rule is,
Brothers, like playing Super Mario Brothers on NES, right? Like the original old school one,
uh
and then getting turned loose onto like Skyrim.
huh.
It's like an open world game, and you're just like, oh, I can go anywhere. Cool. What was it? I was watching something. I don't even remember what the game was. The guy was playing the other day. He was like, dude, started playing this game, and I thought it was super cool. And I was like, oh, there's this thing that I beat, and I can go to this other place. And I was playing the game for 7 days, just holding the up key. What I realized was the map world was so big that it took you just as long to travel as it would in real life. So it was going to take like 4 weeks for him to walk across to the next town so that he could do like something again. It's like,
I think that's Red Dead Redemption, maybe.
no, this was an
Okay.
old game. This was
Oh, okay.
like one of the
Yeah.
first like big open world games. And like, yeah, it was wild. And I was like, oh, that sounds horrible, but that sounds like life. So yeah,
If
yeah,
like
that's
you've
how that
if
goes.
this is, it's a whole new world. It's your first time. Like you're just dazzled by its existence. I mean, imagine like spawning as an adult in the world and just like to be blown away by it.
Well, it's
Like,
essentially what you do, right? Like
yeah,
you're not an adult until one day, then you are.
yeah, kinda, yeah, sort
I mean,
of.
think about how many kids, and this is really sad and unfortunate to a certain extent. How many kids get told by their parents at 18 you got to move out? Like on your birthday, you're done. You're now an adult. Go do adult things. With
Yeah, no,
and sadly, without preparing them for what that means or how they should do that. There are, and don't get me wrong, I think that's a very small subset of the world. I don't know how big that is, especially in the Western world.
right.
Um,
I mean, there's a lot of degrees of that.
right, but but that happens a significant enough amount, and even some of the ones that like you get sent off to college, right? Well, you're kind of on your own there.
Mhm.
Now, you're still in an education system, and so you've got certain guardrails, and you're a lot of times like you're in dorms, and so you have like a meal plan or something like that. But a lot of times people don't, and so yeah, like it's again open world. All the rules that you grew up 18 years of rules, they've all just gone completely out the window, and you realize,
Well,
hey, maybe not all of these rules are like so hard and fast. Maybe there's some flexibility, and maybe some of them don't exist at all. They're literally just a social construct.
yeah. I mean, it's so I one of the things I talk about a lot with the politics is that, remember, at the baseline level, at the end of the day, we are all playing the game of power, and the game of power has one rule: everybody plays. And I think that is something that not a lot of people are introduced to. And
Yeah,
because the sort of
let's be
meta
clear.
game has gotten,
Everybody plays. Not everybody wins. Almost and nobody wins.
yeah, I'm not even sure winning is a thing necessarily. It's just, look, it's the game of power. The goal, if you can call it the goal, is to gain more power.
I mean,
Like, there, I'm not even saying there's a goal to it, but that's it. Everybody plays. If you want to do something, you need to have ability.
right. But I think, and I agree with you to a certain extent on a philosophical level that nobody necessarily really wins. But I think it's also it would be intellectually dishonest to stand back and not look at the game and go, there are clear winners and clear losers in this game,
Well, it's
or people who are clearly winning and people who are clearly losing, and
well,
not
there's
acknowledge that fact,
well,
and
there's yeah,
realize and make that statement, right? Like, that's all
sure,
I'm saying. Like,
sure. No,
like,
I mean, part of it there's a
and
lot
that
of
group that's winning is very small.
yep.
So the
Well,
odds of you getting there
I
are
mean, it's
real low.
yeah. Well, there are a lot of meta games. There are a lot of games within the game. There's a lot of and meta rules that have been enforced by all of that. You've got society and finance, and so there are people that are winning a lot of those games.
That tends to be too confusing for the average person to be able to comprehend.
Okay, well, think of it this way: it's like an RPG, right? Some people there's a few people that are really high level, and as a result of that high level, they can kind of go around and do whatever they want. And then there's people that are very low level, and they can't really do a lot. And regardless of right and wrong, morality, and the rules of whatever town they're in, if a big, strong, high level guy comes in and wants to do something, you may not be able to muster enough people together to stop him. So it doesn't really matter if right, wrong, whether he's breaking the rules he agreed to or not, he can do it, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. I think that's a way better analogy. I like that. It's a way better analogy. I think a lot more people are going to pick it up. The other part of that is that you have to also remember that you have several different stats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to constantly be leveling up your stats across the board.
Yep.
You can't just bury all of your time and energy into one stat. It's not going to work out well, generally speaking.
RPGs are actually a very, very poor illustration of how stats work in the real life. Because
you can do that, where you can just heavy max one side,
right,
and then get the right armor, and all of a sudden you're like invincible.
And
whereas
and
in the real world,
work very well most cases.
You really, Now you should have
but there's good
one
news.
stat is going to be stronger than the others.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You should leverage into that some, but you have to keep those other stats moved up as well. You can't just bury everything into that.
But there's
the good news. Chris has it.
The good news is that if you master one stat, getting other stats that are low level higher up becomes easier and easier. That being really, really good at one thing can help you be kind of okay at others.
It wasn't where I thought you were going with that, but that is accurate as well.
I
was going to say, even if you start with stats of 0 and you feel like you have no value, the great thing about this game we call life, just like in an RPG, is you can always build your stats.
Yep.
And you get to choose that, you get to control it, and you can do it.
I mean, the reality is that you don't get all your stats all at once either, your base stats.
No. No.
And these perks and stats may not be good at the low level at the early game, but are very useful in the later game. Like it's
and also, like in RPGs, like it's good to have people, like surround yourself with people who have different stats than you do.
Complementary traits, absolutely. And
this is why like I continue to tell people, like, men and women are supposed to be together. Like,
yeah,
women are good at the things that men are not good at, and vice versa. We need each other because we're literally built complementarily.
Look, it's one of like the chapters in the manual of the book is masculine and feminine. Like understanding the aspects of masculine and feminine and the balance of that will help you understand so much of this game we call life. Yeah. It's because it represents order and chaos, and the interactions between the two have masculine and feminine components. Your own psyche is being balanced by masculine and feminine components. Like, and if you understand how they're interacting internally.
No.
See, Sean doesn't understand his psyche very well, And
That's
so
right.
he's because he doesn't see the both sides of it, he's ruled by it, and it causes him to get angry and yell at me sometimes.
Yes. And not just you. Let's be clear. It's not just Chris that I yell at.
He actually mostly communicates by
It's
yelling.
it's
It's a concern.
kind of everybody.
But no, I mean, it is the introducing young men, let's be realistic, because at 16, you're really more biologically a young man than you are a child. And you introduce them to the game, and you can pass on a lot of the knowledge that you've developed as a parent into what this game is. That can be some of the most helpful advice in their life, and they may never realize it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the best things is why I think this is why male spaces are so necessary,
Yes.
is because, like, you know, the Elks Lodge, the Masonic Lodge used to be a great place for this,
Yep.
where fathers who were members of the lodge would take their kids. Now, their kids may not be members of the lodge. They may not fully understand everything, but they're also around another group of men who have played the game. They understand the rules of the game, and they can teach you how to they may be able to teach you a few cheat codes, right?
Well, I mean, not even cheat codes. It's just like, here's the here is this
Tips and tricks.
min-max pathway to get through this dungeon type stuff, right? Like, here is this secret path to this dungeon that'll help you get the most loot for the least amount of fighting.
Right.
Like that's the video game equivalent. And it's each one has tried different strategies. Like they're going to have different personalities and different way of approaching the problems, and some are going to work for you, some aren't. But
Yeah.
understanding those are going to be helpful regardless.
Right.
And I mean, I'm kind of inclined to assume that there's a little bit of aspect of that within female-only spaces, but I wouldn't know.
I don't. Yeah.
It's like
Can't speak to that.
like it stands to reason that be the case.
Yeah.
Talk to your mothers and sisters to see if they have advice about that, but I can't help
Talk
you.
to your grandmothers and great grandmothers that you
That's
can.
probably better.
Those are better options, I think.
Yeah, because there is, and some of this is talking about some of the stuff that needs to be that can be considered a little insulting to women or to men, but it needs to be explained. So if you were to describe some of these things the way a man would describe them to a woman, like, I think it comes down to words might have different meanings to men and women inherently.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if it's that the words have different meanings, but they're interpreted different ways by men and women.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, like, well, I had a conversation with, niece and nephew, right?
Right.
I have a lot of them. So many. But they're brother and sister, and they don't know, like, they're basically adults, right?
Okay.
They're either adults or on the cusp of being adults, basically. So they're in that range. And they don't know how to cook. And I'm not talking about like 5-star meals. I'm talking about basic make mac and cheese, for God's sakes.
Yep.
And so I've been teaching them at family dinners, like I teach them how to cook and how to make some of these things. And I'm like, and I'm very open about it to their parents. I'm like, this is a failure of y'all's. You should be teaching them how to survive. Because if they don't know how to cook, what are they going to do? Order DoorDash for the rest of their lives? Great. That's going to be really expensive for them.
Yeah.
Guess why they're broke all the time? Because they have to spend all their money paying other people to prepare meals that they're fully capable of doing. And they have the time to do.
If you can't get a job that pays significantly more than cooking food, then you're probably better, then it's really proportionally expensive to pay somebody else to cook food.
Right.
Right? Like it's if you're a good cook. Now, it's not, there's some efficiencies in restaurants that balance it out, but it's not great. So if the best job you can get is that of a cook, then you better cook for yourself.
I'm not even saying that. I'm saying like you typically at that age, you have plenty of time,
Yeah.
right? Like as you get older, you tend to have more requirements on your time. You have projects, you have responsibilities, those kinds of things. So you don't necessarily have time. And sometimes that means it makes sense, cost benefit analysis wise, to cook or
What
to not cook, to pay
I
somebody else to cook. But at a younger age, it's very easy. Like, hey, you have a job. Now, if you're working 2 jobs or 3 jobs or whatever, and you literally don't have time because you're working all the time, deal. Sold. But if you're
right.
working a regular job, you don't have a second or a third job, you're working basically 40 hours a week, you have plenty of time in your life to sit down and cook. So you should not be paying somebody else to do that.
To cook and
And
then
it's
deliver your food.
vastly cheaper if
Yes.
you'll do it right and do it in bulk
Yep.
and store it for later. Like you can cook for a week at one time, like spend Sunday evening cooking and cook for yourself for the entire week. And then you don't have to do anything but really reheat stuff for the rest of the week.
Yep. Freeze stews and they last a long time. No, I mean it's
Yeah.
like I was
But
talking to
these
some
are
friends.
basic skills
Yes.
that they didn't have. And I didn't yell. I didn't yell.
No, but it's important
I
because
thought about it, but I was mad. I was
it
like viscerally angry because you're failing your children. And why?
well,
And I'm teaching them. I
yep.
I'm teaching them because they need to know this. Why are you not more upset? And why are you not teaching it after you've
And
seen this happen?
and it's an important skill. It's a very important skill. Like in terms of like I am probably saving $500 a month because I know how to cook well and I can do it easily. Like it maybe more because it's like I knowing how to cook, I can live cheap. I can buy in bulk. I can fix things up. I can
You can
like
buy cheap cuts of meat
yep
and to know
and
how
make
to
them taste
make them
good.
taste good.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like I can take a like piece of meat, I can make it taste good, buy the produce in larger quantities at the store. I don't
By the
have to
way,
buy the pre-made steamable stuff.
my my local grocery store had steak on sale for $3.77 a pound for like
77 a pound.
yeah, like tops like
This was a
top
loss
round.
leader, wasn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And they lost a lot because I felt my freezer was almost empty
Now it's not.
and I was like sold. So now it's fully
Oh,
in.
that reminds me of
Yeah.
the time I found something like that where it's like thin things that cut too thin. I'm like, ooh, I can make stir fry with this.
Hmm.
And it was, but it was because it was a messed up cut, it was cheap. But yeah, like that's the thing is if you know how to cook and the basics of cooking, and it's not just it's cooking isn't like, oh, I know how to follow a recipe. It's a lot of it's just familiarity with the kitchen and how things can cook in the pan and just like basic
Baking
stuff.
is follow a recipe.
Yeah, largely.
Cooking cooking tends to be more of an art form. Now,
Yeah,
there are basic guardrails again of
right.
like kind of this, kind of that, but things change and they're so flexible. You just like you almost have to do it through experience. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
better to have somebody who has experience help you so that whenever you're doing it on your own, you see what it looks like and you know, then you're good. Instead, like what you end up doing if you don't do that is you end up wasting food because you end up burning stuff or
yeah. Yeah.
putting the
You'll have
wrong
to eat your
seasonings in
mistakes.
it or whatever. It's just, yeah, that's, oh,
Cheese covereth a multitude of sins.
cheese and seasonings.
Yes. Hot sauce. Hot sauce.
As long as you don't do, as long as you don't overdo salt, you can
Yeah.
always, if if salt is not the problem, salt can generally be the solution.
Yes. Yes.
Or a combination of cheese and salt and butter and like these
When people
umami type
talk about
flavors.
seasoning food, a lot of they mean salt.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality. If you're doing it right, like there's a whole thing. But yeah, in the modern era, especially with TikTok and Instagram and all these sources for all sorts of food
Bro.
inspirations, even stuff that's going to be simple. Yeah, learn to cook. Most of it's going to be like, how do I getting comfortable just like grilling some chicken, or I'm going to sear some chicken and then I'm going to stick it in the oven.
Right.
Like, and then I think we, get some broccoli and steam it in a bowl in the microwave. Like it's,
Learn how to cook rice properly.
yeah,
It's not super difficult.
nope.
It just requires you to either set timers and know, because it's going to differ depending on what pans you're using and what
Mhm.
stove you're using. Those things will differ. But once you get used to your stove and your pans, you can literally set timers and walk away from it.
Yeah. Like the reality is when you first start, it's going to take you twice as long because you're going to make mistakes and the cleanup's going to be slow because you'll burn stuff on
Yeah.
But it'll
And
get
I don't
easier
even
with
know
time.
that you'll necessarily take twice as long as far as a general rule, but it will feel twice as long because you can't leave it. You have to stand there and make sure that it's right,
Yeah.
or you risk
Yeah. I mean,
eating your mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I've eaten plenty of mistakes, some more recently than I care to admit. But
Hashtag me too.
I mean, cooking these skill sets are important, and I would say seek to gain skills wherever you can, how you can, when you can.
Yeah.
If you do something and there's a way to try to do it right.
It's just part of adulting, right? Like
I hate that word.
you need to be able to feed yourself.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, I get it. Life's hard for a lot of people, and sometimes there's
It's
greater difficulties that block in the way of this. And
yeah, but it if even if life's hard, right? Like you deal with what you have. That doesn't, like, you still have to cook meals for your children. Like if you're an adult and you have kids, you
yes,
still have to
yes.
cook them meals.
Oh, absolutely. No.
You
Yeah.
should still bring them into the kitchen and teach them how to
Something
cook.
being hard is not an
Even
excuse.
basically, it may be macaroni and cheese from a box. That may be it. That sucks. But if that's
Yeah.
what you've got, like that's what I grew up with, right?
I
Like,
grew up with two. My mom would,
so
yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, is it hard to do? Nope, not hard at all. But it's really, and I don't know if it's probably just my nature because I'm not scared of trying those new things. But I see it a lot in this younger generation of them. It seems like they're worried about this failure. And it may even be in our generation because so many parents never really allowed their kids to truly fail. And that's even more difficult, I guess, for me to see, is to watch that where they're like, what if I fail? I'm like, it's just a box of
Yeah. Well, I
mac
think,
and cheese. Like, we'll throw it out and get another one. They're like, oh, we can do
I think,
yes, that's it's fine.
yeah. No, yeah. No, I think that there's a lot of truth there. I think you're actually starting to touch in a little bit on what we have planned for next episode. But no, I think that's absolutely right. There's try and fail. So yeah, I'd say check out next episode, and we'll start talking about a little bit the difficulties involved and why some of this advice, why we recognize some of this advice, that some of this is harder than it sounds for you, and we get that, but we still think the advice applies. So we'll talk about that a little bit next time. Uh, Thanks, guys. Please engage in the comments. We really appreciate that. We like to hear from people and hear your opinions. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, guys.